Morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will convene the agenda for Thursday, May 6th, and consider one of the three matters that is scheduled for 9 o'clock, and that is a number of applications, PLSBR 20-004, PLSDP 20-004, PLSBAR 20-006, PLDR 19-0120, and PLNCR 20-003. The applicant in all of these matters is the Harborview Marina, and the request is for remodeling and of the marina to include new improvements and stabilization of the shoreline bulkhead. The site is located at 3219 Harborview Drive within the City of Gig Harbor. For the record, my name is Steve Casso. I'm the City of Gig Harbor Hearings Examiner. I am an attorney in the private practice of law with the firm McCarthy & Casso that is located at 902 South 10th in Tacoma. So if anyone knows of a reason why I should not hear the matter, please indicate. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and proceed. The way we'll proceed in this morning is we'll first hear a presentation of the Community Development Department staff report by Kim Mahoney. Following that, we'll hear testimony from the applicant and those that wish to speak in favor of the request, and then testimony from those who wish to speak in opposition or have questions or concerns. Following conclusion of the hearing this morning, I will take the matter under advisement and will issue a written decision, and that decision will be transmitted to the city and the applicant at the address shown on the staff report, as well as to the applicant's representative. Because we are doing this by, well, we are required to accept all testimony in these quasi-judicial hearings. Under oath, I will swear everyone in, or you will swear people in as a witness as it's their turn to testify. So at this time then, Ms. Mahoney, if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I swear.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. Just a housekeeping item before we dive in really quickly, because we are holding our virtual hearings. We'd appreciate it if everybody who's not speaking on the record presently mute their microphone for clarity of our record. I will also provide this reminder at the beginning of every agenda item that we have on the schedule today, is that any members of the public who are listed as an attendee for this matter may choose to use the raise your hand feature in the Zoom platform when the opportunity is presented to extend public comment, which will be made clear by the examiner. At that time, staff will call out your name or the last four digits of your phone number if you're calling in, and that'll be your opportunity to enter your comment and enter your testimony after read into by the examiner. Your comment will be limited to 3 minutes. With that said, let's dive into the Harborview Marina. Before you today, Mr. Examiner, is a request for your consideration and decision of the proposed office replacement and bulkhead repair at the Harborview Marina in Gig Harbor, located at 3219 Harborview Drive. The site is currently developed with a 562 square foot marina office building and an associated covered storage area of 81 square feet. Approximately 10 feet of the existing marina office is constructed over water and is supported by angled timber supports connecting the base of the structure to the existing bulkhead. I am going to share my screen and just display a couple of pictures to give a good understanding of what this looks like. If you can see this image, Mr. Examiner, this is what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Right, 10 feet over water, supported by these timber piles. These timber piles are also proposed to be removed as a part of the site improvements. The applicant proposes to remove the angled timber supports and the existing structure. The applicant also proposes to reconstruct the marina office to occupy a smaller footprint of only 475 square feet with a 70 square foot associated covered storage area and repair the existing bulkhead retaining the site's uplands. No overwater or in-water work is proposed for this project, and no change or expanse of the use is proposed. The site's required to provide public access and is requesting a shoreline variance to deviate from strict adherence to the public access design requirements set forth in Gig Harbor Shoreline Master Program, Chapter 6.5. To this end, the applicant is seeking a shoreline variance to allow the incorporation of an at-grade public access rather than one located at the highest level of the proposed structure to improve the accessibility of the designed public access and locate the public access in a manner which facilitates visual access to the water, as is required via SMP section 6.5.3. The floodplain development permit file number PL-flood-20-0003 will be administratively processed in conjunction with the building permit applications that will be required subsequent to an approved decision from the examiner in today's matter. And the SEPA threshold determination associated with file number PL-SEPA-20-0007 became final on April 18th, 2021, with no timely filed appeals. Therefore, the hearing examiner's decision today is requested for the applicant's shoreline substantial development permit, site plan review, shoreline variance, design review, and non-conforming review permit applications. The subject site is the Harborview Marina in Gig Harbor, located at 3219 Harborview Drive. It fronts Gig Harbor Bay, which is a critical fish and wildlife habitat. Impacts to critical fish and wildlife habitat have been assessed by the applicant and peer reviewed by the city's third-party environmental consultant. All impacts have been sufficiently mitigated, as this is described in the mitigated determination of non-significance issued by the city. The staff has recommended the hearing examiner incorporate the mitigation measures associated with the SEPA threshold determination in section 10 of the staff report. This project's application, public meeting, and this hearing have otherwise been appropriately noticed, and staff has received no comments from the public in response to this project's noticing. The Harborview Marina is located in the waterfront Millville zoning district and the city's historic district and the city waterfront shoreline designation. Therefore, the proposal is subject to applicable provisions of the municipal code and the shoreline master program. Staff has reviewed the applicant's request and finds the proposed site improvements as consistent with all applicable provisions of the municipal code and the shoreline master program, as has been described at length in section 8 of the staff report, and specific to the design review permit, as has been recommended to the examiner by the design review board. In conclusion, the proposed office replacement and bulkhead repair at 3219 Harborview Drive is consistent with all applicable criteria for approval, and staff recommends the hearing examiner approve the requested permit applications subject to the recommendations set forth in section 10 of the staff report. This includes my introduction, and I'm happy to address any questions that you might have, Mr. Examiner.
I think this time the only question I have is, did you include the MD&S mitigating measures within the conditions of approval?
I did, Mr. Examiner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we will, does the city have anything further it would like to present on this project?
No, not at this time.
Okay, then we'll now hear testimony from the applicant and those that wish to speak in favor of the request. So who'll be speaking on behalf of the applicant?
This is Jeff Stroud. I'll be representing the ownership group.
Okay, you want to raise your right hand for me, please, Mr. Stroud? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead and if you could just give us your address, please, or if it's just the business address, that's fine.
Yeah, the business address is 3219 Harborview Drive, Gig Harbor 98335.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I'm a slip owner there and I'm representing the condominium association. Just briefly, the reason for this project is our bulkhead, which was built in the 60s, needs to be repaired. All these repairs will be done from the bulkhead back towards land. We will not be working over water at all, with the exception of removing the supports that the city staff showed in the pictures and the building above it, which will be pulling back and a new setback established for that. The building is not only is the bulkhead need work, the building is failing too. So this is a comprehensive project, which we believe, and in working with the staff, I think we have a really good solution to make a much more attractive and a functional facility there. And other than that, I am available for questions, but we agree with the staff's recommendations and have talked at length with them. And we have Kathy Hargrave and Larry Lindell from Sitson Hill available if there's any technical questions of that nature.
I guess the only question I had is Ms. Mahoney is representing recommending 17 conditions of approval at the end of the staff report. I wondered if you had any questions or concerns and if you'd had an opportunity to review those.
No, we have reviewed those, and we've reviewed those, with her specifically this week once the staff report was out, and we don't object to the conditions.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in this matter? Okay. Ms. Mahoney, do you have anything further that you'd like to add?
No, Mr. Examiner.
Okay. Well, I will go ahead then and take the matter under advisement, and we'll proceed to issue a written decision. And thank you very much for coming this morning then, and we are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, and I guess we're I guess we should have scheduled it for 9:30.
Yeah. It was a good project there at the marina, and didn't think it would take too long there.
Okay, we will reconvene then at 9:45 with the 7Cs matter.
Understood.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. Kim and Mr. Casso wanted to let you know Cindy and the other planning technician have notified the parties of record for the rezone that it would be continued to 3 o'clock this afternoon. We've also posted it on our city's website under a news flash.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Here we go. You're ready to begin.
Good morning. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we will reconvene the agenda for Thursday, May 6th, and consider the second of 3 matters that are scheduled for 9 o'clock. And that is the applicant in this matter is Horsehead Investments, LLC. And the case numbers are PLSPR 19-0013, PLSDP 19-0004, PLALP 19-0009, PLDR 19-0115, and PLDR NC or PLNCR 19-005. The applicant in all of these matters is Horsehead Investments LLC, and the the project is to allow construction of the 7Cs tap room at a site located at 2905 Harborview Drive. Once again, my name is Steve Casso. I'm the City of Gig Harbor Hearings Examiner. I am an attorney in the private practice of law with the firm of McCarthy and Casso that is located at 902 South 10th in Tacoma. So if anyone knows of a reason why I should not hear the matter, please indicate. Otherwise, we will go ahead and proceed. The way we'll proceed then this morning is we will first hear a presentation of the Community Development Department staff report by Kimberly Mahoney. Following her presentation, we'll see if the city has any additional testimony or evidence they wish to present. And then following that, we will hear testimony from the applicant and those that wish to speak in favor of the request, and then testimony from those who wish to speak in opposition or have questions or concerns. Following conclusion of the hearing today, I will take the matter under advisement and will issue a written decision. That decision will be transmitted to the city and the applicant, and anyone else that desires to receive a copy of that should let Ms. Mahoney know of your name and address so that she can transmit a decision to you as well. Since we are doing this hearing virtually, I will need to swear each one of you in individually as a witness. We are required to take all testimony in a quasi judicial hearing under oath. And so before you commence your testimony, I will swear you in as a witness. And then when you do begin your testimony, please state your name and address and spell your last name for us so that we have it correct for the record. At this time, then, Ms. Mahoney, do you want to raise your right hand for me, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I swear.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. As a reminder for some housekeeping items, for clarity of our record, we're requesting that anybody who's not speaking on the record keep their microphone on mute. As to the matter of the public comment period, once the examiner opens up the public comment period, the way that we'll manage allowing opportunities for each member to enter their testimony into the record is to ask anybody who wants to participate to use the raise your hand feature in the Zoom platform. And then staff will call out your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number. And that will, and then we'll invite you to be able to speak onto the record. Everybody is limited to a 3-minute testimony. With that, let's dive in. Good morning. We're here today for your consideration and decision of the 7 Seas Taproom and Marina redevelopment proposed at 2905 Harborview Drive. The site is currently developed with a 2,799 square foot structure and an attached 1,834 square foot deck and a 4,302 square foot dock system, which were previously used by the Green Turtle Restaurant and the Sunset Yacht Sales commercial businesses. The applicant proposes to demolish the upland structure and reconfigure the dock. A new 6,000 square foot structure with a 1,391 square foot deck is proposed for use as a tavern, an outright permitted use in the site's waterfront commercial or WC zone and the city waterfront shoreline environment designation. The applicant also proposes the reconfiguration of the existing dock structure to create a smaller marina of only 3,674 square feet. The reconfiguration of the dock results in a net decrease of 628 square feet of overwater coverage and the removal of 23 creosote-treated timber pile to be replaced by only 12 steel support pile. The redevelopment includes improvements to the site's access and off-street parking and provides outdoor common area and public access. The floodplain development permit application, permit file number PL-flood-20-0004, will be administratively processed in conjunction with building permit applications that will be required subsequent to an approved decision from the hearing examiner on today's matter. The decision requested by the hearing examiner today is for the applicant's shoreline substantial development permit, site plan review, design review, alternative landscape plan, and non-conforming review permits, which are analyzed at length in the staff report. The subject site is a 1.32 acre site immediately fronting Gig Harbor Bay, a critical fish and wildlife habitat area. Impacts to critical fish and wildlife habitat have been assessed by the applicant and peer reviewed by the city's third-party environmental consultant. All impacts have been sufficiently mitigated, as is described in the mitigated determination of non-significance issued by the city on January 14th, 2021. Staff has recommended the hearing examiner incorporated the mitigation measures associated with the SEPA threshold determination in section 11 of the staff report. The site is located in the WC zoning designation and the city waterfront shoreline environment designation and has a long history of varied commercial development in Gig Harbor. The site's history is described in section 5 of the staff report, which includes a reference to Exhibit D, a compilation of aerial photographs from the Department of Ecology's Coastal Atlas Map Shoreline Photo Viewer, evidencing the site's long-standing varied commercial use. The proposed redevelopment will allow the site's use as a tavern and marina, both outright permitted uses consistent with the site's zone and shoreline designation. At this point, I would like to give an overview of the criteria of approval associated with each permit requested by the applicant, along with staff's accompanying analysis. The applicant is applying for a shoreline substantial development permit, and this must be found consistent with the Washington Administrative Code's review criteria and with the goals and policies of the Shoreline Management Act and the Shoreline Master Program. Pages 13 through 17 of the staff report analyze the applicable provisions of these codes at length. In sum, the applicant's proposal contributes to the unique mix of uses and activities that support the character of the Gig Harbor waterfront, particularly in that the applicant proposes water-dependent and water-oriented uses of the site and has taken care to uniquely design the taproom structure with architectural characteristics of a net shed, paying homage to Gig Harbor's proud fishing and nautical history. While the site's existing structure is located waterward of the site's vegetative conservation strip, setback, and critical area buffer, the proposed structure considerably reduces the non-conforming positioning of the existing structure by relocating the tavern landward of the existing structure's location and designing a vegetative conservation strip, which is consistent with the Gig Harbor Shoreline Master Program and further enhances the ecologic function of Gig Harbor Bay. The site also provides public access, which will be recorded as an easement with Pierce County and available for use of the general public, further supporting the access and enjoyment of the Gig Harbor waterfront. These findings support the criteria for approval of both the Shoreline Substantial Development Permit and the non-conforming review permits applied for by the applicant. The applicant's also applying for a design review permit and an alternative landscape plan. The applicant participated in 2 public meetings with the city's design review board to propose a holistic alternative design permit. Following these meetings, the DRB issued a recommendation of approval for the hearing examiner's consideration, which is included as Exhibit F to the staff report. The DRB's recommendation included provisional language regarding the applicant's landscaping to further separate the site's development from the neighborly residences to the south and limit the size of the proposed tree plantings to native species, which will not exceed the 18-foot height limit associated with the site zone. These details are specified in the applicant's revised landscape plans. In particular, sheet L2 of Exhibit B portrays the retention of a mature evergreen hedge spanning the shared property line of the southerly residences, measuring approximately 12 feet in height by 90 feet in length, which is further lined with new evergreen tree plantings and a landscaped 52.5-foot setback area separating the new structure from the residences to the south. Staff has reviewed the applicant's revised landscaping and confirms that the landscaping is consistent with the provisional recommendation extended by the DRB. Staff has also considered their proposed landscaping against the review criteria established for an approval of an alternative landscape plan and agrees that the applicant is proposing a superior landscaping plan than would be achieved through strict conformance with the city's landscaping standards. Therefore, the criteria for approval of the applicant's alternative design review permit and alternative landscape plan have been satisfied. Finally, the applicant has applied for a major site plan review permit. A site plan must meet the criteria set forth in Gig Harbor Municipal Code 17.96.035 to be approved, which requires compatibility with surrounding uses and consistency with all relevant statutory codes, regulations, and ordinances. In addition to this proposal's consistency with the design and landscape requirements and applicable provisions of the Shoreline Master Program, pages 8 through 12 of the staff report discuss other applicable statutory codes to which this proposal is subject and compliant. The subject site is located in the WC zone and is bordered on the west by vacant land owned by the city of Gig Harbor in the residential and business RB1 zone. It's bordered on the south by the waterfront residential or WR zone with developed residences, and it's bordered on the north by the WC zone, which is developed with the marina and upland professional offices. It is clear that a wide range of uses presently exist in the area, and the applicant's proposal perpetuates this range of uses in a manner consistent with the site's zoning. The subject site is required to provide side setbacks that total 57.35 feet with a 5-foot minimum setback on either side. The side setbacks on this site apply to the northern and southern property lines. The applicant has elected to design their project with an overwhelming setback against the southern property line to maximize the distance of the site's outright permitted use with the existing residences to the south. A 5-foot setback is applied to the northern property line, and a 52.5-foot setback is applied to the southern property line. Exhibit B includes the applicant's site plan conveying the positioning of the proposed structure. The city's land use matrix establishes all permitted uses, conditionally permitted uses, and prohibited uses in each of the site's zoning designations. A tavern and a marina are each outright permitted uses in the site's WC zoning designation. The WC zoning designation's development standards are set forth in Gig Harbor Municipal Code 17.50.040. The applicant's proposed hard surface, setbacks, and the gross floor area of the structure all comply with the zone's development standards. Finally, the city's off-street parking standards apply to the proposed development. These standards are set forth in Gig Harbor Municipal Code Chapter 17.72. The applicant is proposing 21 off-street parking stalls to serve the tavern's 72 seats and the 6-slip marina. Gig Harbor Municipal Code 17.72.030 provides parking standards for both marinas and taverns. It is specified in this section of the code that if a commercial or residential development is to be combined with a watercraft usage requiring parking, the usage which generates the larger number of spaces will satisfy the requirements of the other usage. If not combined with the upland commercial use, the applicant's marina would require 6 off-street parking stalls. The 72-seat tavern requiring 1 parking stall for every 3 seats requires 24 parking stalls. Therefore, the 24 stalls required of the commercial development that is combined with the watercraft use of the site generates a larger number of required parking spaces than the marina, and therefore satisfies the parking needs associated with the marina. Furthermore, as is provided for in the city's design manual, required outdoor common area may afford an applicant with a relief in parking of 1 stall for every 200 square feet of common area. This proposal is required to provide 600 square feet of outdoor common area, affording a 3 parking stall reduction in the site's parking needs. Applying this reduction, 21 off-street parking stalls are required to serve the site's use as designed. Therefore, the applicant has designed its proposal consistent with the parking regulations set forth in the Gig Harbor Municipal Code, and has also designed the site consistent with all other relevant statutory codes, regulations, and ordinances, and in a manner compatible with surrounding uses. Staff has recommended conditions of approval for the hearing examiner's consideration, which intend on ensuring the site's use remains consistent with all applicable statutory codes. Included among these recommended conditions are restrictions on the seating capacity of the site and a limitation of the site's use to prevent product distribution or other industrial use. The city has issued a mitigated determination of non-significance for the SEPA file number PL-SEPA-19-0017, included as Exhibit P to the staff report. Comments received by the public in response to the noticed MD&S are included as Exhibit R to the staff report. No appeals to the SEPA threshold determination were timely filed, and the SEPA became final on April 18th, 2021. This project's application, public meetings, and this hearing have been appropriately noticed, and all timely filed comments have been exhibited with my staff report for the examiner's consideration. Specific to the notice of public hearing, the comment period ended at 5 p.m. yesterday, May 5th, 2021. All comments received by staff after the date of the staff report, but before the close of the comment period, were transmitted to the examiner's office with an addendum from staff dated May 5th, 2021. Staff requests the hearing examiner incorporate this addendum and its referenced public comments to this project's record. As to the content of some of the comments submitted by the public, staff would note that all alleged or real violations of the code related to a site's operation or development are managed separately by the city's Code Enforcement Division and bear no relation to the criteria of approval for the requested permits in today's matter. Any discussion of code enforcement is appropriate to be directed to the community service officer for his management and investigation of alleged code violations. And staff urges the examiner to consider any discussion of code enforcement in this project record as inapplicable in his consideration of the requested permits. In conclusion, if appropriately conditioned, the proposed taproom and marina at 2905 Harborview Drive are consistent with all applicable criteria for approval, and staff recommends the hearing examiner approve the requested permit applications subject to the recommended conditions set forth in section 11 of the staff report. This concludes my introduction of this project. I'm happy to address any questions that you may have, Mr. Examiner. I'm also joined by Aaron Holst, PE and Senior Engineer with the City of Gig Harbor Public Works Department. He is available to address any questions related to his department's review of this project.
Did staff review the noise analysis that was prepared by Mr. Lilly? And I just wondered if you had any comments on that.
You asked if staff has any comments on that?
Yeah, I just wondered if you had any comments on that at all.
I think that we're referring to the analysis that was done last summer when the site was vacant and unused. At that time, if that's the report that we're speaking about, Mr. Examiner, then that report conveyed consistency with the Washington Administrative Code standards for noise ordinances.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lynn, do you have any questions for Ms. Mahoney?
I do not, thank you. I was muted.
Mr. Rambrou, do you have any questions for Ms. Mahoney?
Just a couple of questions. In the staff report, there is a reference to occupation of the existing structure in advance of the decision issued or to be issued by Mr. Casso. And that relates to use and site conditions. Has the staff reached any conclusions about the existing use of the site?
Can you give more specificity to what section of the staff report you're referring to?
This was in Exhibit 3 to our material, and let me grab that section. This is on page 19, number 6.
Thank you. Condition number 6. Any occupation of the site's existing structure in advance of a decision issued on the land use permits to which this staff report is subject is limited to the intensity of use and site characteristics previously permitted by the City of Gig Harbor. Any change to such use or site characteristics is expressly prohibited, lest the property owner secure approved permits from the City of Gig Harbor to allow for such change.
That's the condition. The site is now being used for a taproom facility by the applicant, is it not?
Seven Seas is currently occupying the site, and this condition, if accepted and incorporated by the examiner in an approved decision, would limit the use of the site to its previously approved permits.
And what is that previously approved permit?
We have permits on file for most recently the Green Turtle Restaurant.
Okay, and have you made any determination as to whether the existing use of the site is consistent with those permits?
I think that we are in a manner right now of discussing an alleged code enforcement by your client. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, but the question is whether or not the existing use of the site is consistent with the previously issued permits. Have you reached a determination in that regard?
I'm going to object to the question. She's already made clear that enforcement, if there is an enforcement action ongoing, that it's unrelated to the permit and it's a separate process with separate people involved. So I don't understand how this has any relevance to today's proceedings.
I think what the question is here is whether or not the applicant's present use of the property is consistent with the previously issued permit. I'm not sure that that's, I don't know that that's necessarily an enforcement question, but it's a question of whether or not the city has determined whether or not the present use of the site is consistent. And that is that I think that question is just basically, are they using it the way they're, I guess it could be termed enforcement, but I think it kind of is kind of a gray line there. So I just asked Ms. Mahoney, has the city made any kind of determination about whether, you issued a permit, have you made any kind of determination about whether the use is consistent with that permit?
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. Not separate of any code enforcement case associated with it.
And just one other question, that the last sentence on condition 6 on page 19 of the staff report references lest the property owner secure approved permits from the city of Gig Harbor to allow for such change. Has there been any application for permit approval for the existing use?
There has been a permit approval for a mechanical permit. There has not been a permit approval associated with the use of the site.
And has the city placed any limits on the time that this site could be used for its existing use?
No,
So that could continue on for months or years, is that right?
subject to any review of any non-conforming rights that apply to the site.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Thank you, Mr. Casella.
Anything further, Mr. Lynn?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Does the city have anything further that it would like to present at this time?
Not at this time, Mr. Examiner.
Mr. Halls, you don't have anything then at this point?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, then we will now hear testimony from the applicant and those that wish to speak in favor of the request. Mr. Lynn, did you have any opening comments you wanted to make, or do you just want to call a first witness?
Bill, you're muted.
I apologize. I'll stop muting myself so much. I'm so afraid of coughing or something that I mute myself. I think I'm gonna introduce Matt Van Den Heuvel, who's the owner. I think he's gonna make a brief introductory comment. Then you'll hear from Carl Halson on the land planning issues, and then Ben Ferguson on the architectural design. I'm going to reserve any comments I have for the conclusion, summing up our position and responding to any comments.
Mr. Van Heuvel, do you want to raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
Swear.
Okay. If you could just state your name for us, please, and your business address.
Sure. My name is Matt Van Den Heuvel. Business address is 10809 32nd Street Court Northwest, Gig Harbor, Washington 98335.
Thank you, sir. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner and city staff and all other attendees on the call and Zoom today. My brother Brett and I co-own the property at 2905 Harborview Drive in Gig Harbor, Washington. I'd like to start today by taking a few minutes to introduce our background and our vision for the site. We hope that through our presentation today, you will see that we've taken a great deal of time and care to design a tasteful project that fits well into the sensitive site and a project that the city of Gig Harbor can be proud of. Brett and I are local brothers born and raised in Gig Harbor, and we've grown up here and lived here for 37 years. We went to public schools in Gig Harbor, and we are now raising families of 3 in this beautiful town. We were very fortunate to acquire this property from the Haub family in 2018, and they were thrilled that it did not go to a big out-of-town developer. Our vision for the property is to create a beautiful place on Gig Harbor Bay that both family members, the community, and visitors can come enjoy the breathtaking views of Mount Rainier and the views of the bay. We'd like to help revitalize this area of Harborview Drive to provide more waterfront access to locals and visitors. We are proposing to build a new building that's design shape as a nod to the historic net sheds in the city of Gig Harbor, and our architect will present more on that. We are proposing to replace and build a new marina that will be a mix of both public, customer use, and private moorage. Seven Seas Brewing is a local Gig Harbor business, and that's one of the most iconic brands in the city of Gig Harbor. They are our build-to-suit tenant. Our builder, Washington Patriot, is a local company out of the Gig Harbor as well. We've put together a team of local design and consultants that took our directive to ensure that we took a great deal of thought into how this site would incorporate our use and make sure that it's sensitive to both neighbors' feedback, city comments, and all rules and regulations. In the future, we hope that the community comes down and enjoys our beautiful waterfront site, enjoys a cold beer, and the views of Mount Rainier. We want to thank you for your time and consideration of our project today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Who's next, Mr. Lynn?
Mr. Halson, I think, has his hand up.
Oh, Mr. Halson.
Dutifully.
You swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth.
I swear. Thank you, Mr. Examiner, and big thanks to Kim Mahoney for all her diligent hard work throughout the last 18 months on this project.
Could you state your name and address for us, please, Mr. Halson?
Yes, it's in the staff report. Carl Halson. I'm the agent for the applicant. Business address at Post Office Box 1447 in Gig Harbor, 98335. The new owners, Matt and Brett, contacted me in the summer of 2018. We met down at the site, and they shared their vision with me for a new building that would house a tavern with some small batch brewing, office space, and redevelop the marina. The first thing I noticed, or I guess we talked about when we got to the site, is how important this site is for Gig Harbor, particularly from the water perspective, the bay itself. When you come into the Gig Harbor Bay by boat, this site is the first non-residential site that people see. Once everything to the south of this site is our houses. And so it was going to be important as we went through the redevelopment process and permitting to keep that in mind. This is Gig Harbor's front door from the water perspective. We began talking both formally and informally with city staff, confirming what I had found looking at the codes and the zoning designations of the property, considering the non-conforming structure in terms of its lack of vegetation conservation strip, confirming the setbacks that were required in the zone transition issues, some of the meatier issues we were going to have to deal with as we were going through the permitting process. In the spring of 2019, we did a pre-application with the city of Gig Harbor staff, and at that meeting, it was suggested that we do a pre-application meeting with the design review board as well. We did that design review board meeting in the summer of 2019, and we got really good design direction from the design review board members, both for the site and for the building. Leading up to, in the fall of 2019, we got our application package completed and submitted to the city. Once we got the city's first batch of formal comments on our application in early January of 2020, one of the things that was laid out to us as an option by former city planner Pete Kadich was that we consider doing the full 100% design review board approval of the project for conformance with the design manual, a process that I'd never been through before. And I've been doing this in Gig Harbor since we've had a design manual. So that was new to me. And the concept being that rather than bring a few items to the design review board, like we've done on other projects, you bring the entire project to the design review board, and they can comment and make suggestions on any component of the project that needs design review board approval or needs to be in conformance with the design manual. We had our first meeting with the board in middle of February last year. Was obviously we were going to need a second meeting based on the comments we got from them and some of our design ideas, and that was fine. That's the iterative process that we signed up for. And then COVID hit, and everything got shut down for about 4 months until we were able to figure out how to get back to the design review board now in a virtual setting. And late May last year, we got back to the design review board. And at the conclusion of that lengthy meeting, we came out of that with 100% recommendation of approval for all items in the design manual. Subsequent to that meeting, we went through 3 more iterations with city staff. And by an iteration, I mean, they give us formal comments on the project, non-design manual issues, then we give them a resubmittal. We did that 3 more times, and we got final approval from city staff in late November last year. That which led to the SEPA determination in early January and leads us to where we're at today. And that's what I wanted to lay out for you, Mr. Examiner, give you the project history from a permitting standpoint, and then turn it over to Ben, the architect, to take you through the design process we went through for the site and the building.
Thank you, Mr. Halson. You know, I forgot, Mr. Lynn, do you have any questions for either Mr. Vanden Heuvel or Mr. Halson?
I do not, thank you.
How about you, Mr. Aramburu? Do you have any questions for either witness? I think you're muted.
He's muted.
I'm muted. There I go, back online. Thank you, Mr. Cassell. Mr. Van Hovel, you had some discussion about the reconfigured marina during your testimony. And we had a question about how the marina is going to be used. Are the marina slips that would be a result of the reconfigured marina to be used exclusively by patrons of the Seven Seas Taproom?
I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. I'm unmuted now. So the redesigned marina we are proposing will include a mix of public day use for Seven Seas customers, a public boat, small vessel landing, and 5 private moorage slips.
And the 5 private moorage slips would be used by individuals, boat owners, who would not necessarily be patrons of the tap room. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. And so we're going from about 20 private moorage slips today down to 5 private, and the rest would be boat only access. Correct.
Okay. And when I was looking at the new marina, it looks like there are 5 45-foot slips. Is that right?
The city of Gig Harbor code addresses 45 foot in their code, and so that's maybe where you're coming up with that. But the slips are 70 feet in length. So yes, or greater than 45 to answer your question. Yes.
Okay. And so boats that are 70 feet long could use those marina slips.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Van Hovel. And thank you, Mr. Cassell.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Halson? Mr. Ramberg, do you have any questions for Mr. Halson?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and who was the next witness, Mr. Lynn?
Mr. Ferguson.
Mr. Ferguson, you want to raise your right hand for me, please? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You could state your name and business address for us, please.
My name is Ben Ferguson. I'm the principal of Ferguson Architecture. Ferguson is spelled Ferguson, and our business address is 1916 Jefferson Avenue, Tacoma, 98402.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner and staff. What I'm going to go through today, is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
I can.
Okay. So this is the view that the owner has been talking about, and that Carl mentioned, that this is the view that the owners are looking to bring to the public and to show off their hometown. This view here shows the existing site as it was when the Green Turtle was there. And some of the attributes that I'd like to highlight that we've tried to maintain through the design. There's 4 kind of main things. The first is the building, which is just short of 3,000 square feet, is located on the north portion of the property, providing a buffer to the residential properties you can see on the south side. The south is the left side of the screen here, and you can see there's residential there. Everything to the right or up on this image is the existing portion of zoning that matches the zoning for our property. And you'll see there's a mix of different sizes of buildings. In fact, the Green Turtle is one of the smaller buildings of the buildings that you can see along this area. The scale of the building immediately north is quite a bit larger than the Green Turtle. There's 2 historic net sheds, which there's been reference to that was kind of the design intent of the project. And then you can see the tides there at the top. And for reference, Harborview Drive is on the top of the screen, kind of the top left corner. So the 4 things that we're trying to pay attention to is, one is the size of the Green Turtle, not only the size of the building, but the size relative to how big it is from Harborview Drive. It's essentially a 1-story building from Harborview Drive. There's a parking buffer on the west along Harborview Drive. As you can see, there's a large landscape kind of open area towards the residential area, and there's the long hedge that was referred to in the staff report that up next to the residential property, and then the boat moorage. These are the 4 kind of key pillars of the original design. When the owners talked about their love for Gig Harbor and how they wanted to do Gig Harbor proud, it initiated a series of design explorations by our team. We came up with 3 different designs. One of them was focused on the net shed concept, and that was the one that the owners overwhelmingly, the owners and the tenant overwhelmingly appreciated, which was the idea of the net shed. So what our team did is we went through and looked at, and here's some examples. This is a map of the net sheds. Each of the red and orange squares is places where net sheds are located, and the photos are some examples of some of the net sheds. And what you'll see by this shape is they have a vernacular shape that kind of is reminiscent of what a little kid would draw maybe for a house, where it's a little square with a hat on it. And really, the net sheds are just an extruded version of that shape. And it's such a strong design element of Gig Harbor when you go along the waterfront that we really wanted to have this building relate to it, not copy it, but refer to it. And some of the other attributes you'll see is the way that windows are punched, the way that they're siding. Sometimes there's vertical siding, sometimes it's horizontal, but usually it's a rusticated siding, and it has real crisp, simple utilitarian details. Nothing super fancy, because these were working buildings, but they have a charm to them that Gig Harbor has used in their design standards. These are some diagrams that early on we were using to convey to the owner kind of what the idea is. So if you see in the top left on one, taking the idea of a net shed profile and extruding them to the length that made sense for the program, for the project. We were limited to 3,000 square foot floors by the city standards. So that really locked in the biggest that these net sheds could take up space. And you'll see in item 2, what we look to do is to take these net sheds and think of them as basically like view apparatus while you're looking down this tube. And one of them we wanted to focus directly on Mount Rainier, and the other out to Gig Harbor Bay. And in 3, you'll see that we merged them together to make one volume. And then we started to play with the ends, and we opened up the end for windows, and then we opened up some of the sides to Gig Harbor Bay to make it so people inside could work with the bay. On 6, you'll see how we started to look at having outdoor decks, and this has evolved. Originally, the outdoor decks were going south towards the neighbors, but initially in our very first conversations where this was being shown to the public, it was very clear that the neighborhood to the south was very concerned about having outdoor people closer to them. So immediately we pulled them back and put them on the water side of the property. So that's one of the moves that we've made to try to make this project a friendlier neighbor. This is a three-dimensional image of what the original, not original, but like the early design was. And some of the attributes you'll see here is you can see the scale of the building, which is quite similar to the residential buildings to the south. The residential building most close to us also has sort of a net shed. It has a kind of flatter roof net shed, kind of simple gable volume, and it has a 2-story building, and ours is also 2-story. They're very similar in scale. One of the main factors you'll see on here that was not appreciated by the neighbors is number 4, which is an ADA ramp to get down to the waterfront. You'll see with if you can see my cursor, it's right here. This was originally how we were planning on getting people to the open space where people from the public could come experience the water, and also to get people to accessible access to the boat slips. We had planned on doing it kind of along the grade so that it allowed people to enjoy the water as they were going there. And initially we thought that was a really smart idea, and it was good all around. But again, the neighborhood was concerned that they were bringing potentially the public very close to their residences. So the owner directed us to come up with a different solution. That's a more expensive solution that I'll get to later in the process. But the four main characteristics, if we remember back from the existing site that we were trying to maintain, is the relative scale of the Blue Turtle, which was about a 2,000 or just shy of 3,000 square feet, which is what we have here. It's on the north corner of the property. We've pulled it further away from the water, which we had the ability to remain in kind of some non-conforming condition, but in discussions with the city, we pulled it out of the water area to make sure that it was completely conforming. We still have the parking lot on the west side, but the owners have proposed to improve it and make it a much better parking area that handles stormwater and has accessible stalls and stripes and all of the things that you would want. We've also taken the entry currently is 2-way, and it's quite steep. When you come down there, it's inappropriately steep in gravel. And what we've done is smooth out this to make it much safer so you can see when you're coming over the hill. And it's a 1-way area. So we only have people coming in one spot and people exiting in another. And the goal here is to have traffic impacts be less for the neighborhood and for the commercial district. Anyone who's been to the tides knows what it's like sometimes when you have people coming and going from the same entrance on a steep hill. It can be pretty treacherous. So we spent a lot of effort trying to get this right. Some of the other factors of this design that are major improvements over the Green Turtles is the Green Turtle does not have any pedestrian access to if you're walking on Harborview Drive and you come down to the Green Turtle, you have to walk through the driveway on the gravel on the hill. And what we've done is we've come up with a pedestrian circulation area that brings you right to the front of the building. It's safe, it doesn't cross traffic, it doesn't put pedestrians at risk. And then the other one, which was really challenging to do, is this site is steep. And one of the main goals in contemporary design is to try to make buildings accessible. And to get someone in a wheelchair from Harborview Drive to the water is no small matter. And what we've had to do because of the grades is you'll see that this path on one, and I'll follow it with my mouse, this is the route where we've had to make ramps that are all accessible ramps that come across to the parking lot and then bring you back up to the front door. And we'll show this in more detail later, but instead of having the ramp around the south side of the property, we've moved it to the north side, and it's too steep on the north side to be able to ramp it. So the owner has approved us to have an outdoor lift, basically an elevator, for people who have disabilities that can get down to the water. And that's the process that we've gone through. And it's, I think we've not only done the right thing, but we've come up with a solution that minimizes challenges to the neighbors, and it's very appropriate for the public and for the users. And we think that we've handled this in a highly appropriate way. So these are kind of the main factors that I wanted to highlight here. And then I'd also like to show that we've kept the landscape buffer that was existing, and we've increased the amount of vegetation. We've kept the hedge and added more, and we'll get into this in more detail. But we think we've heard very clearly from the neighborhood what their concerns were, and we have done everything in our technical and feasible power to try to mitigate those. And we feel like we've done as much as is possible and reasonable to do. And so in summary of this page, the four main characteristics of the prior building we've maintained in the same spot. All those four things remain intact, but we've also added some safety features. Oh, sorry. These are three renderings that we've done to show not only the owner, but the neighborhood. These were presented in public meetings because our goal is to be transparent in our process and show what our intent is, so that if somebody has concerns, that their concerns are founded in reality. So here you can see this middle one, I think, is a good one to talk about. This is the view of the building when you come into the parking lot, and you'll see it's not a big building. It's 3,000 square feet on this floor, but it looks like something much smaller because we've split it into two different volumes, and it has a real strong influence from net sheds. It's welcoming. It feels like a commercial building, but it also feels like it belongs in Gig Harbor. When we brought this through the DRB, their comments were that this building exceeded expectations in Gig Harbor, and it exceeded their requirements for the design review board. The upper image shows what the view from the tap room will look like. And you'll see that the way that we've aimed this is even to the right of the residential. So we've turned this in a way where it's not even focused at the residence, it's focused at the mountain. And then this lower one shows you the scale of the building from the water. And what we'd like to point out here is this line right here is the grades. And this really is a one-story building on the grade, and then it has a daylight basement. And the daylight basement is not even perceptible from the street. So effectively, for anyone who's not at the site, this is perceived like a one-story building. And most of the buildings in the neighborhood are 2 stories and visibly 2 stories. So this building hunkers in even more than the context that it's surrounded by. And again, I'd reinforce here that I think this design has met the criteria of Gig Harbor and done so in a way that is less impactful than what we could have done and still met the code. Okay, so make sure I didn't go too far. These are sorry, they're getting cut off here a little bit at the top, but these are the design standards that are required within Gig Harbor that we have worked very hard to meet. And going through the design review board, they have agreed that we have met the intent, and in most cases exceeded the intent in all 11 categories. Through this process, we did learn things from neighbors, and we did learn things from the design review board that we've adjusted to. And I will show those to you in just a moment here. But one of the things that I want to point out is by the code, we're allowed a 48-foot tall building. So we could have made this bigger, but we felt that the size that we had was appropriate. So we've only designed a 45-foot tall building. So we are not even maxing what is allowable for how we could have designed the project. This image is one of the earlier ones. I'll show you where it has the site ramp. And we have an update of this later that shows how it is now. But again, what I want to reinforce, this is the massing of the first residence. This is the massing of the project to the north. And our project, we think, is really gentle in bringing the scale of the commercial district down. And we believe this is appropriate and beautiful. Now I'd like to switch to talking about what we learned in the design review and what we learned from our community in the multiple public meetings that we've had where we've listened to people to understand what their concerns were. And these 17 items are the things that we have changed as a result of the DRB and the public review meetings, and we'll go through each of them in detail. But you'll see there's a number of them. One of the pieces I want to highlight here is this blue outline is the original location, the current location of the Blue Turtle restaurant. And what you'll see is we're essentially in the same place, but slightly further away from the water. The Blue Turtle also has outdoor dining decks, multi-tiered outdoor dining decks, and we have kept that. So essentially we're doing, again, the same thing of what the Blue Turtle has before. So now I'll go through the changes. So these two items show how we've handled the accessible route. This is a plan. Harborview Drive is on the left. Big Harbor Bay is on the right. And the location is here, and the residential neighborhood's on the bottom. As we originally had, as I mentioned, is people coming down these ramps, crossing the parking lot, and then doing the site ramp down to the water. And now what we've done is kept it, because of the concerns of the neighbors, we've brought the people back up to a lift, basically an outdoor elevator here, which allows them to get to a grade where somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with a disability could easily get to the public viewing area. We also have a path around it, which is something that anyone can walk. In fact, this path basically exists today and people walk it all the time. It's safe if you're not in a wheelchair, and we're maintaining that as well. And then the second piece was we've adjusted the size of the throat to meet Gig Harbor standards for fire department. We are trying to keep it not too big, and it is now complying with the city's requirements. The second area we want to talk about, and this is one of the biggest areas that we learned from the neighbors that we were not aware of before the public process, was how the new driveway exit would affect the neighbors. And we've heard some things from them that were reasonable concerns that we've adjusted. One of the major ones is that the current neighbors have a driveway that infringes on our client's property. And it's because of grades. It's really difficult to get to Harborview Drive in the appropriate place. So they're coming up along the water, and they're coming currently into Harborview Drive where our driveway is going to be located. And originally we thought that those two things could happen together and it wouldn't be an issue. But what we've learned is they're concerned about maybe people leaving the 7 Cs that might inadvertently go the wrong way. So we've done some work on the curb to make it so it's obvious that they're going that way. We've agreed to add lane striping so that people know when they're coming out where they should be going. We've extended that curb. We've added a sign that say this is a private road. And we've added signage at Harborview Drive that says that this is a private road and that this is a one-way entrance. So we're trying to do everything possible to make sure that people don't inappropriately use the private driveway and still allow the neighbors to use their non-conforming driveway. The next area we heard was concerns about when cars come in, that maybe in the evenings, their lights will disrupt the neighborhood or disrupt the neighbors. So this is a section that we've drawn that shows an actual grade and where a car would be located. This happens to be where the cars come in is actually a location of a garage. There are no cars that would come perpendicular to their house. It's only their garage. But besides that, we're still keeping the existing hedge, adding additional heavy landscaping, and we've agreed to create a gabion retaining wall so that we have a hard barrier for lights, and then the trees to soften what other impacts there were. And our understanding is this exceeds the requirements, and we're trying to do this to be good neighbors and to not disrupt the neighbors. Coming back to the landscaping parts of this, you can see that there's extensive amounts of landscaping being added in this area. These all meet the requirements of both species, planting densities, and all of the requirements that have been asked for by the city Gig Harbor. And our understanding is that this meets or exceeds whatever requirements, and it should minimize impacts to the neighbors. And then we've already talked about this a little bit, but we've relocated the public viewing area to the north side of the property. And we've created a plaza coming into the space with an accessible and a non-accessible route to the public viewing area down below. And this also provides access to the mooring and the marina. And I think this might be our last one. Is the last thing that we've done is we heard from the neighbors that some of them have trailers that they use, and the trailers are difficult to navigate on their existing driveway, and they were concerned that this would be a problem. So we've agreed to lengthen the throat of this, which is far superior to what it is currently, and to make the grades work and have a heavy radius. So when they come in with their trailers, they'll be able to navigate this without any danger to themselves or to our patrons. And with that, this concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions now.
Okay, Mr. Lynn, do you have any questions for Mr. Ferguson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Rambaroo?
I do not.
Mr. Ferguson, the only thing I would like to get a copy of those documents that you were using during your testimony and make them part of the record. So
our understanding is Kim has a copy of this record, and Kim, would you be able to provide that to Mr. Examiner?
Yes, I can.
Thank
yeah,
you.
and yeah, I'd like to get a colored version too, because it set out pretty much, you know, what Mr. Ferguson was talking about, and so I'd like to get a color copy of his presentation there.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Lynn?
The only other thing I have at this point is to ask about the exhibits. I'm gathering that the staff report is in the record with all of its exhibits. There was an additional addendum to that apparently was provided to the examiner, and now we have this, the documents that accompanied Mr. Ferguson's presentation. So I'm not sure if I'm not sure what form that takes, but I want to make sure it is in the record and assigned an exhibit number.
I was provided the staff report along with the exhibits A through K, and then let's see, and Mr. Rambaroo's submittals were included in there. So I think that what we'll do is, since the other documents came in last night, I will make those Exhibit L. That's the most recent submittals prior to the close of the public testimony or public comment period. So those will be Exhibit L, and then we'll mark Mr. Ferguson's exhibits that he used as Exhibit M.
Mr. Examiner, we already have exhibits L and M. Could you mark them as exhibits S and T?
Oh, they're Exhibit S and T? Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner.
Mr. Examiner, if I may, with respect to, we understand now that there's an addendum to the staff report that has been submitted to you. We have not seen or had an opportunity to review that document. There are time periods in which staff reports are to be submitted. We'd like an opportunity to review that and provide comments on it, if we may.
Yes. How much time would you like?
Well, it kind of depends on how big it is, but a week, would that be fine?
Yes, a week would be fine.
could we clarify what that is? My understanding was it was just additional public comments that came in after the staff report, but before the hearing, before the close of the comment period last night. So it was likely comments from Mr. Aramburu's clients.
What I have here is just one page. It says, please find attached to this email an addendum prepared by staff, which contains all timely public comments received. So, Ms. Mahoney, is there, I have not had a chance,
I can speak to it, Mr. Examiner.
What's that?
I can speak to that, Mr. Examiner.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and Mr. Lynn has it exactly right. It's simply a collection of any public comments that were submitted after the date of the staff report, but within the public comment period associated with the notice of public hearing, to directly respond to Mr. Aramburu. Your comments submitted yesterday evening and all the exhibits were included as an attachment to that addendum.
Okay, so there wasn't anything of substance to the addendum. It was just kind of a forwarding email with the attached.
Correct. There were no changed details of the staff report or staff's findings.
Yeah, all I have is a one-page document referring to the additional comments and then 75 pages of comments. So would you like to review the comments that were submitted?
I would, Mr. Examiner. It may be that I don't have any comments on them, but I would like to review them.
Okay.
And those can be emailed to us, and
okay.
so that would be the way to do that, I think.
Okay, well, I'll leave the record open for a week for both attorneys to and staff, if staff wants to comment on them as well.
Thank you. That's all the applicant has then at this point. I know
you wanted to make some closing comments, but we'll hold that until after everything's in.
I did note that Mr. Holst had his hand up, and I happened to see that. So.
Who did?
Aaron Holst from the city.
Oh, did you wish to present anything, Mr. Holst?
Yeah, not necessarily to present anything, but just curious, is now the appropriate time to ask a couple of questions of the applicant team?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just a couple minutes ago, when Matt was speaking, he presented that there was going to be 5 private moorage slips proposed with this facility. And my question's related to transportation, so I was just curious, does the applicant team have their transportation engineer on this call today, Greg Heath?
We do not.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I was the one that reviewed the TIA, the traffic impact analysis for this site, and that in that TIA, I don't believe it was ever represented that there was going to be 5 private moorage slips used for this site. So I guess it's my opinion that that's going to slightly modify the TIA that you guys have prepared for this project. I don't think it's going to be a significant number of trips, but I think that that's something that we need to potentially consider leaving this open for the applicant to modify the TIA that's been submitted for the project. I think there's going to need to be kind of a supplementary look at that piece of it.
Is that something that can be done in the 1 week period that we're leaving the record open for?
I believe so.
Okay, then if that's necessary, then I will, we'll go ahead and leave the record open, and then any modification of the TIA will also need to be sent to Mr. Aramburu and Mr. Lynn.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Holtz?
That was all for now. Thanks.
Okay. Would you like to take about a 5-minute break and then start with Mr. Ramburu's presentation, or do you want to continue? Why don't we go ahead and break for about 5 minutes? Let's reconvene at 11 o'clock. I think I may have jumped the gun when I said it was time for Mr. Ambaru's presentation. I meant to, have all the testimony favorable to the project presented. Then Mr. Ambaru could respond to all of that at once. So I think what we'll do when we is commence with testimony from anyone else that's logged in here to that wants to testify in favor of the project to go ahead and speak at this time, and then following that, we'll then hear testimony in opposition or expression of concerns about the project. So, Ms. Mahoney, do we have, or Ms. Anderson, do we have anybody that's that wishes to speak in favor of the request?
Thank you, Mr.
Or do we
Examiner.
know? Maybe we should just, can we determine whether they're in favor or not? I guess I just ask right now if if there's anyone present that wishes to speak in favor of the request.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. I might suggest that we just state on the record right now that we're opening public comment for those comments in the attendees that wish to speak in public or wish to speak in favor of the project, and ask that anybody who wishes to participate use the raise your hand feature and raise your hand, and we'll work down the list if that is agreeable to you, Mr. Examiner.
Yeah, I just like to get all the favorable testimony in first, and then allow Mr. Ambaru to respond to everything at one time.
Understood. We do have a couple of hands raised, and so if you're okay with it, Mr. Examiner, then we can tee up a 3-minute timer, and then call out the last names of the individuals who have their hands raised indicating they'd like to speak in support of the project.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Allowing for Guy Hoppin to speak into the record.
Okay.
Guy, if you can, I just gave you permission, so you should be able to unmute and speak in the record.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
That's probably fine. That's probably good. Guy Hoppin, 8402 Goodman Drive, Northwest Gig Harbor.
Okay.
I'd like to speak.
I need you to raise your right hand for me, please.
Oh, yeah.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now and hearing shall be the truth? Just answer by stating I do.
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
I'm in favor of this project, and here's why. Years ago, I'm a bit of a waterfront advocate, especially waterfront commercial advocate in Gig Harbor. And at one point in my advocacy, I ticked off the miles of commercial waterfront and on this side of the bridge in Western Pierce County. And there's about the better part of 100 miles of waterfront. And it comes down to, with regard to waterfront commercial, there's only a few thousand feet of waterfront commercial property. And that needs to do a lot of things for our community. And, part of my interest, of course, is our traditional uses like commercial fishing and boat repair, boat building. But as important as that are these commercial properties that act as public access points, and those are our restaurants like the Tides and the Shoreline. And I think it's really important. There's always going to be a line between a commercial zone and a different type of zone, but that shouldn't necessarily erode the use of that waterfront commercial property that our community can access. And so I really support what's going on there. It's been a commercial property all my life. And I applaud, this is the first time I've opposed my share of projects in the harbor. And Mr. Ferguson and the owners of this property, and perhaps it's because these owners are local, they understand what's going on here. And I think this particular project, the way they've designed it, it honors Gig Harbor in a really, really fine fashion. And if it didn't, I wouldn't support it, period. But number one, I'm supportive of waterfront commercial properties staying waterfront commercial, especially with water dependent uses. But the next best thing are these uses that create public access. It's almost better than a park, in my view. When you can go down and have a beer or a meal and see Mount Rainier or the portions of the harbor, doesn't get any better. So I applaud these property owners and 7Cs for this. I think it'll be a great sample of what can get done on these properties that will benefit a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppin.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppin. I will now invite, and I'm very sorry if I mispronounced your name, Mr. Tom Lavrovich.
Tom
Hey,
Loverbeck.
you got it pretty good. That was a good step.
You want to raise your hand for
Hi,
me?
can you hear me
please?
okay?
Yes. Can you raise your hand for me, please?
Yes, sir.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now and hearing shall be the truth? Just
I
answer
do.
by stating I do. Okay.
Hello, mister.
And sir, if you could
I
please
do.
state your name and address for us, please.
My name is Tom Lavrovich. I own a commercial net shed at 3811 Harborview Drive. And it's been years since I've been in front of you, Mr. Examiner, when I got the application for my own project down there in the waterfront. But I'm in front of you today to support this project. I've been following it along and I see everything they're doing is very tasteful, and it looks like they're doing everything they can to please the neighborhood and the surrounding area around them. And as a lifelong resident commercial fisherman here in Gig Harbor, I look forward to seeing this project come through, and it's greatly needed here in Gig Harbor for more access to the water. And I also agree with the comments made by Mr. Hoppin. He made some great points as well. And him as a lifelong resident has seen a lot of this community. And so I just urge you to approve this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Those are all of the participants that we have from the public that wish to speak in support, Mr. Examiner.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Rambaroo.
Mr. Examiner, I don't have a prepared set of witnesses in this regard. It is a public hearing, and I know that several members of the public are interested in speaking. I'm kind of in the situation of Bill Lynn. I have some summary comments. I provided some materials to me, so I would probably prefer to provide summary comments in the same fashion as Mr. Lynn is.
Okay, that would be fine. Ms. Anderson, you want to find out then? Let's hear testimony from anyone that would like to speak in opposition or have questions or concerns.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Examiner. I'd like to invite any member of the public attending this hearing to use the raise your hand feature to offer a 3-minute testimony with any questions or opposition that you have regarding this project. I will start with the hand raise that I see for Mr. Steve Chapman.
Where Mr. Chief, Steve Chap, I see his name, but I don't see his picture. Okay, Mr. Chapman, do you want to raise your right hand for me, please? Can you hear me? I don't, he may be still muted. Mr. Chapman?
I can see his mic coming off mute.
Here.
Are you there, Mr. Chapman?
I'm here.
Okay, if you could move a little closer to the microphone there. I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay,
All right, that's better. Could you raise your right hand for me, please?
I have.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now and hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. And go ahead and state your name and address for me, please.
My name is Steve Chapman. I live at 2829 Harborview Drive.
All right, sir. Go ahead.
I would like to direct your attention to the 7C's MDNS comments document that I sent in as a PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
Okay.
Regarding Mr. Ferguson's comments, I appreciate that they moved the ADA ramp away from our properties here. That was a big concern, and I also appreciate the changes that they made to the driveway, my driveway. My driveway works fine for my trailers as it is. It was their original design that was the problem. Okay, so referring to slide 2 of the 7 Seas MDNS comments, it basically addresses privacy. So first thing, I disagree that Ferguson and Horsehead have done as much as possible to mitigate privacy, noise, and other issues regarding the commercial to resident thing. First, the hedge is not 3 feet thick as indicated on the drawing. Where the gravel lot is, it's basically about 3 inches thick, but either way, neither of those provide noise buffer from an audio perspective. So that does no good. Second, if you look out the windows, as it were, of the building for the 7 Seas, you will be looking right at the house at 2901. And so I would ask that no patrons be allowed on the deck there where those windows face the house. They should only be allowed to be around the thing. Also in regard to this, the gabion wall that's being proposed, basically the lights of a Ford F-150 will shine right over the top of it, so it should be taller. It should also be longer in length to cover the entire parking lot they're talking about adding, because the just the 5 stalls that point at the 2901 property, that doesn't take care of the noise issue. All right, I'm going to move on to slides number 3 and 4. Basically, comments are the setback. Yeah, the building is maybe 70 feet away, but the parking stalls are like 18 feet away. So don't tell me that, you know, we're meeting the setback. People will be in that parking lot and making noise, and their cars will be making noise, and et cetera, et cetera. So the other thing is that the land management plan.
That's the 3 minutes, Mr. Examiner.
I'm not done.
It's all right. Let Mr. Chapman go ahead.
All right, so the landscape management plan, there are maybe 8 trees that they're putting up that are over 8 feet tall. Well, considering that the house next door is about 20 feet tall from that area, there is no privacy for that side of the house based on the height of those, the height of that vegetation. And once again, that vegetation provides absolutely no noise abatement. Okay, slide number 10 of the same PDF file or presentation. The marine surveys came out on the same day and did my survey for my new dock as they did on the dock that's being put in at the 7 Seas. And they basically covered part of the 2905 property when they did that. And that indicated that there is bulk kelp on that property. And I had to move my dock as a result of the DFDW not allowing me to build out there without paying for mitigation. And I don't see that bulk kelp listed in the 2905 habitat management plan, and I want to know where it went. All right, I'll stop there.
Did I understand you were concluding?
I can stop there and let others speak.
Oh, Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak?
Yes, Mr. Examiner, we have one more participant, Mr. Tim Gartland.
Okay, Mr. Gartland. Okay, do you want to raise your right hand for me, please? Do you swear or, excuse me, do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go right. Could you, I need you to just state your name and then give us your address, please.
Sure. My name is Tim Gartland, and I'm part owner of the property at 2827 Harborview Drive, which is, within 300-foot distance of the proposal. And from the beginning, I have more or less taken the position that the Seven Seas business was going to be too large, too popular, too successful a business for the site that they're proposing. And we could see that easily by just, making observations at their Judson Street location where, the number of cars often well exceeded the number of parking spaces that they were, proposing in their application. So from the beginning, I've always thought that, you couldn't necessarily hold it against Seven Seas for being such a popular and successful business, but you could hold it against them for trying to introduce it into, what is partly a residential neighborhood for obvious reasons, in that those excess automobiles would pour onto the streets. And the difficulty there along Harborview is that it isn't so much that the cars, land on the shoulder. There's not a shoulder to speak of, so they do land in the road. And while being on the road, reduce the traffic to one lane and required the northbound traffic to drive on the wrong side of the road. So as Ms. Mahoney has pointed out, apparently there's two departments in the city, one for making approvals to applications which put cars in the road, and a whole different one where you would make a request for some enforcement against that result. And for me, that's a bit confusing, especially since the project hasn't been approved yet, because I would request that the project be denied until some solution, some sustainable solution, one that will last, well into several lifetimes for the time that, Seven Seas may be there, to deal with the parking issues, which will come as a result of their popularity. And today, on top of not only knowing from observations of their last site that the number of cars exceed the number of parking spaces that they're proposing, but I've learned, for me at least for the first time, that they intend to have a public or a rental moorage facility there also, which is likely to bring in additional automobiles. So from my perspective, their popularity is too great for the neighborhood. It creates a conflict, in excess traffic and additional or excess parking, which results in illegal parking and potentially dangerous parking along Harborview Drive, and request that the application be denied until some suitable solution is presented to take care of that additional parking.
Thank you, Mr. Gartland. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Yes, Mr. Examiner, we now have Abigail Hodge.
Ms. Hodge, do you want to raise your right hand for me, please? Or are you there?
Yes, I am, and my right hand is raised.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. If you could just state your name for us for the record and your address, please.
Abigail Hodge, 2901 Harborview Drive in Gig Harbor.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to provide some comments. As the most immediate neighbor, we have shared concerns throughout the application process. And like others have said, we really do want to express our appreciations for the considerations and the changes made along the way. discussion up to this point, or a lot of this point, is on paper. And so we would like to just, I'd like to imagine, as you consider the application, bringing it to life off of paper with the patrons, employees, and cars. As a very popular alcohol-only serving business, the picture transforms and presents considerable concerns. So as those most in close proximity to our home and the neighborhood, we're particularly concerned about the noise. And we've submitted details regarding outdoor seating and the amplification of music several times in writing. So we would respectfully request that outdoor seating be limited to mitigate the sounds of patrons' voices, which often at times, especially in evening hours, mimic an outdoor party, which can be heard while outside and even inside with our doors and our windows closed. We do want to express our sincere appreciation to the Seven Seas Brewery for the adjustments they have already made to the amplification of music in the outdoor spaces. These adjustments have provided significant improvement and allow and will continue to allow patrons to enjoy the natural beauty and the sounds of the harbor. So as such, we would request that restrictions or conditions are permanently in place should management or ownership change in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hodge. Anyone else? Is there anyone else? Ms. Andrews?
We do have Steve Chapman with his hand raised, and also Raylene with a hand raised.
Okay, well, let's take the person that hasn't spoken yet first. Who is that?
It looks like they've lowered their hands.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Raylene, excuse me, my apologies. Raylene has once again raised her hand.
Okay. Okay, are you with us, Raylene?
I am with you.
Okay, can you raise your right hand for me, please?
I have my right hand raised.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could just state your name for us, please, and spell your last name.
Raylene Rogers, R-O-G-E-R-S.
And what is your, yeah, go ahead.
2804 Harborview Drive, number C.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to add just a little bit to Mr. Gartland. We live on the street, and I do understand that that is a different department according to Mrs. Mahoney. But I witnessed the other night as I was leaving Harborview and couldn't get past the cars that were parked on the shoulder and another car coming in my lane of traffic. He backed down about halfway down the street and almost hit pedestrians doing the backup. And I know that the traffic issue has been brought up before because I worked on a different project for this site. And it was a major bone of contention at that time. But the impact of this traffic has become quite substantial. We witnessed cars driving down our dead-end street. One night there were 5 cars that came down the street and turned in Mr. Morris's driveway to turn back around to try to find parking at the Seven Seas. This is a quiet street. Most people walk on the street. They don't walk on the sidewalk, which in years past, the neighborhood did petition to have that sidewalk put in. So it's become a very dangerous situation. So I just want to make note of those observations that I have had as a neighbor on that street.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Is there anyone else besides Mr. Chapman that has their hand up?
Just Mr. Chapman.
Okay, you put Mr. Chapman back up. Mr. Chapman, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And just remind you, you're still under oath.
Yes. So
okay.
Just a couple more things. One is regarding the parking lot, right? The city has given permission for the applicant to only provide 21 stalls rather than the the total that would be required to support 72 seats. Those 5 stalls, excuse me, those 5 slips that Matt was referring to for rental moorage, basically by city code require 5 additional spots. And so either they should not be allowed to rent those slips out, or they should add more parking. And sorry, there was one other thing. Oh, so just as a side comment, I disagree with the statement about this code enforcement thing, but whatever. Basically, the beer garden that's been added onto the side of the 7 Seas was not there. It was a boat parking lot for sunset yacht sales. And since the 2 lower deck, or the 2 decks at the back actually will hold 21 people, which is the legal seating capacity, the beer garden should be removed. Thank you.
Wait, excuse me, Mr. Chapman, what are you referring to as the beer garden? Is that the deck?
The split rail fence that has 3 or 4 canopies up in it with fire pits and chairs, sitting on the grassy verge.
Okay, that's there now. That's there at present.
They just added it as part of this temporary 7 Seas thing. It was not part of the Green Turtle nor Sunset Yacht Sales.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else, Ms. Andrews?
No, I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Lynn, does the applicant have anything it wishes to present in response to the concerns that were raised?
I have some comments that relate to those, and I think given the difficulty of trying to organize via Zoom, I think maybe I'll just go ahead with those.
Okay.
And then the others on the applicant's team can decide to what extent they need to add to that. So should I go ahead with that now then?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Let me start with a more personal note than I would normally probably make, but I have not been involved in this particular project for a while. I was involved early on. I've seen it morph a little bit, but it has really transformed in the last months during this design review process. And I'm really happy to see that happened. I'm happy to see the time that was spent just presenting the efforts to accommodate concerns that the neighbors expressed and that the owners heard throughout this process. I've worked on a bunch of net shed cases in Gig Harbor. I know how dear they are to the community, and it's really nice to see the effort to really make a project that fits. It's just an aside. It doesn't really have anything to do with your decision. A couple things about this case, though, that I think are really notable and really relate to the comments that you've heard from the neighbors. First of all, this is an allowed use outright. Both the tavern and the marina are uses that are allowed and encouraged by the city's code. So this is not the kind of discretionary case, a rezone or a special use permit where you might be really asked to exercise a lot of discretion. This really involves the application of the city's adopted standards to this matter. And the second thing is that this is a long-standing commercial use. It's not as if the commercial use of this property ought to come as a big surprise. Not only has it been zoned this way for a long time, but there's actually been an operating restaurant here that goes back a number of decades. So the idea of commercial use, and not just that restaurant use, but also a yacht sales facility and a larger marina. I think that's one of the things, and it's kind of the obvious answer, I think, on traffic. We're reducing the size of an existing marina from 20 slips to 5. So there will be a traffic impact, but it's going to be a reduction in traffic, not anything else. So hopefully that will be a quick consideration during the time that the record's open after the hearing closes today. So we you know, a lot of these conditions are non-conforming conditions. The parking lot greatly improved, pedestrian access improved, safety, just the operation of the whole facility will be greatly enhanced. So we're not talking about maintaining a non-conforming use here. We're talking about improving upon a use that happens to be non-conforming, but with a use that's otherwise allowed under the city's current codes. Primarily, this amounts to the application of existing standards to this development. The applicant got miles ahead through the design review process by kind of taking the hard route, but one that makes the job here easier today. The rules here are met in every instance, and there really is not a dispute about that. The comments about parking that somehow the 5 slips that are going to remain of the 20 in the marina require parking is just not accurate under the city's code. The city's code says that where there's a marina on the same property as a commercial use, the one with the higher parking requirement governs and no other parking is required. So long as the applicant meets the requirements for the tavern parking, which it does, there is no additional parking required for the 5 stalls. So I think that concludes what I have to say. You know that under the project review statute and under the city's own code, this is just a matter of applying the rules that the city has already adopted to govern this. The very thorough staff report shows how the code requirements are met. And frankly, the architectural review made by Mr. Ferguson just indicates a level of care and design that really should make people really excited about the project. That's all I have. Before I give up the role here, I should ask Mr. Halson and the owners whether they have anything to add by way of response to the public comments.
I see shaking of heads, so.
Okay, I don't see
I think
Mr.
you covered everything.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Arambaru?
We've submitted, I'm Richard Arambaru, attorney representing several of the neighbors. My office address is 705 2nd Avenue in Seattle. I have submitted a good deal of written material to you, Mr. Examiner, consisting of letters over a period of about 1.5 years, addressing various matters here. I'm not going to read those. I'm not going to repeat what's in that material. What I want to do this morning is to summarize my views on some of the testimony that was received today and address what I see to be some pretty key legal issues. Also want to say hello to Bill Lynn. Bill and I have been involved in cases before, and one of the COVID problems is I don't get to shake his hand and find out how he's doing. So hello, Bill. I want to talk about 3 subject matter with you, 3 issues with you. The first of which is a very unusual situation for you, and that is that this applicant has apparently lost its lease on a space that it has on Judson Street and has decided just to move its operation down to this property without so much as a buyer leave to the residents or the city. As you will see from photographs in Mr. Chapman's presentation, they've gone down, they put up tents, they put up seating, they put up fire pits, and they're operating a beer garden down there. And apparently the city was kind of aware of this going on and said, well, you can't expand the use, but now Ms. Mahoney says, well, this really isn't a land use issue, this is an enforcement issue. And the concern is that this is going to be an unregulated activity that's going to go on for some period of time. And that's concerning, particularly given all the issues that have been presented. This use requires some land use review. It's a change in use. The green turtle was a restaurant serving food. This operation does not serve food, as I've pointed out. So this is a real concern. There needs to be some review of this activity beyond just sort of saying, well, we're going to ignore it, which is what Ms. Mahoney says. Issue number 2, parking, which has 2 components. One, the tavern, 2, the marina. As you've heard in testimony today, which is largely unrefuted, as a matter of fact, that parking is a real problem in this area. The success of businesses, including the Tides Tavern, has created overflow parking, which goes into the street, which goes into residential areas, which actually impacts the right of way on these streets, as one of the witnesses testified. So this isn't something to sort of be smoothed over. Parking is a legitimate issue here. And as we point out in our written materials, parking has been an issue from the very beginning of this project, when the applicant tried to get a code interpretation that would allow them to not have more parking than was at the Green Turtle. The issue now, which is very concerning, has to do with how you calculate parking in the city of Gig Harbor. What you're supposed to do is to figure out what the reasonable parking, what the reasonable seating capacity of the facility is. And in this instance, the applicant submitted, and this is attached to our materials, submitted a seating plan that showed 116 seats. And that would require 38 parking stalls. But then when they found out that they can't have 116 seats, which are comfortably accommodated inside and outside, they said, well, we're going to go back to 72. So they sort of went through and checked off various seats and said that they weren't going to be used. But the capacity of this place is far beyond the 72. How are we going to know when there's 72 patrons in this facility? I recognize there's been a commitment to keep the 72, but we have no idea how that's going to be enforced. And if the past is prologue, they have been violating standards for this unregulated use that they've just established over there. So, this is a really this is a concern in this area, and parking should be based upon the reasonable capacity. And certainly easy enough to find a folding chair and put it out in the deck and put it inside, but we've got to keep to the 72. And so what you ordinarily do is you base that on the size of the facility. So the size of the facility must be reduced so that there are would be reasonable accommodation for 72 seats. So the second issue has to do with the moorage slips. And again, it's kind of a concern in the staff report. They kind of went over the issue of how these moorage slips were going to be used, leaving the impression that the moorage slips were going to be dedicated to the taproom. Well, as I pointed out in my brief, certainly during the summertime, nice view of Mount Rainier, you're going to pull up in your boat and use a slip. But the truth of the matter is that on a November night, when the sunset is at 4:55, there's going to be no people using those slips that are going to the taproom. And so the testimony today by one of the owners was that these are going to be private slips. And they're going to be rented to private boat owners. And under the code, a private slip rented to a private boat owner requires a parking stall for slips over 45 feet. Now, Mr. Lynn says, well, if it's just on the same property as another use, they don't have to require parking. But the key word for your interpretation, Mr. Examiner, is the word combined. These private slips are going to be rented to private people, whether or not they spend any time in the tap room, whether or not they buy any beers there or anything else. And they do legitimately require parking stalls. I'm not much of a boater myself, but I know when you're headed out for 3 or 4 days or a week, you arrive, you've got a lot of stuff to take on the boat. You come down and repair your boat, fix your boat. Boaters are people who love their craft, and they're down there all the time. So parking spaces are necessary for this, and they're short. They need 26 parking stalls, not 21. And the proposal is inappropriate on that basis. Finally, the question of compatibility between this use and the residential properties to the south. There's been a lot said about that. I do want you to pay very close attention to Jerry Lilly's noise report. And he went out and took some careful measurements, concluded this is a very, very quiet area, and addressed some of the noise issues. And that's a principal problem for the neighbors. People on the decks, like it's a party place, and that noise does drift over and does impact the residential communities. And similarly, having a parking stall headed in less than a car length from the property line seems entirely inappropriate, and those 5 parking stalls should be eliminated. So I've tried to be fairly quick. Mr. Cassell, if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. And as I indicated, I rely on the letters and previous correspondence we've had with the city.
Thank you, Mr. Rambaroo. I don't have any questions. I'll just ask Ms. Mahoney, do you have anything further that the city have anything further it wants to add?
Yes, Mr. Examiner, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to address some of the testimony that was provided. I won't try to be brief because I believe that everything that's written and been spoken already is it's not going to change. My testimony remains, but some of the questions that have been introduced or needed additional clarity, I'd like to take an opportunity. One of the items that came up in public comment today was a conversation about the presence of a certain species of kelp. It's acknowledged as bull kelp species. It's a protected species in Gig Harbor Bay. And the question was how that applies to this site. That is addressed in Exhibit C to the staff report. There's a biological evaluation that has been prepared and has been the basis of staff's review. Page 13 of Exhibit C addresses the kelp in the area, and it acknowledges the depth of the kelp in the area as being too deep to be impacted by any sort of scour activity from boats that are using the new marina structure. And so again, this material is all provided to all agencies of jurisdiction in the state of Washington. That includes the Department of Natural Resources. It includes the federal and the state Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's reviewed as a third-party peer review by the city's consultant. And all of this was found to be agreeable and sufficiently mitigated by the applicant's proposal. And so we have no concerns as it relates to the kelp that exists in the tidelands of this site. A quick address of parking from the city's consistent application of these 2 uses. There are 2 definitions that relate to the required off-street parking that is required for this use, and that is the definition of required parking for a tavern and the definition of required parking for a marina. I'll first address the tavern's use, the reasonable seating capacity that is associated with the tavern's use. Kind of 2 things to discuss here. One is that there is a difference between a seating capacity of a building and its occupancy. Occupancy capacity is something that is addressed from a building and a fire perspective. It's a safety matter. Seating capacity is something entirely different. It's not the city's practice to apply its own ideals or interpretation of how many seats could reasonably fit inside of a floor plan of a proposed use in Gig Harbor. That is not something that we have any past practice of doing. It's not something that's been applied in this project. And finally, as it relates to the definition of parking associated with the marina, the word that we seem to be relying on quite a bit in this hearing is the word combined. The city has no past practice. We've applied this definition of parking associated with a marina in many other instances in the city. And there hasn't been any consistent past practice of referring to this term combined as needing to create some sort of causal relationship between the upland use and the marina use. And so we have applied that definition consistently with this application. This is not a new view or application of how that code applies in this case. I don't have anything further.
Thank you. Mr. Lynn, the applicant has the burden of proof, so I'll allow you to make any closing comments you wish to, and then we will adjourn the hearing.
Just a couple on parking. And I think Ms. Mahoney covered a lot of what I was going to say, so I won't repeat that. You know, the city has a code. They have an adopted code that sets a standard, and it doesn't set a different standard for successful businesses over others. If it did, the Tides Tavern would probably have to have structured parking because the demand there is pretty high. It's pretty successful, admittedly, but nonetheless, knowing that the city council adopted a code requirement for the parking here that it meets. It's interesting though, this argument about the marina and whether or not it's considered separately. Even if it were, it would have required 20 parking spaces previously then, and the applicant, as the owner of a non-conforming use, would get credit for those 20 parking spaces. So by going to 5 marina spaces instead of 20, the applicant would actually be entitled to a credit for parking spaces that it could have used to make the tavern larger. So I don't think that that's a direction that anybody really wants to go if they want to oppose the project. In any event, I think that Ms. Mahoney addressed the comments well. I don't think the applicant has anything at this point. If we are going to have a week to respond to comments, I think anything else we might want to add, we could certainly do during that period.
And I think Mr. Ramberg can as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will go ahead then and take the matter under advisement, but I will leave the record open specifically for comments to any further letters that or emails that were submitted to the city by the close of the comment period last night. And then also for the a review of the traffic impact analysis. And then any comments by either party regarding the revised TIA. And then following receipt of all of that information, and I would just suggest that you submit your comments to Ms. Mahoney, who can then put any comments she wants to on that and then forward it to me in a package. And then at that point, I'll close the record and proceed to issue a written decision.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Examiner? Excuse me, but
sure.
I do not think that we have received this exhibit with the comments that came in after the staff report was issued. Could we just, and maybe that'll just be posted on the city's website, but it would be helpful if we could get a copy of that so that we could look at those newer comments.
Yeah, I think that's what Mr. Ramberg was asking earlier, and that I don't think he had received it either. And so we make sure that that both of you, Ms. Mahoney, can make sure that both of you get those letters and other documents that were submitted.
Thank you.
And for our part, if Mr. Lynn will agree, we'll send you over what we submitted to the city if you send over what you submitted.
I don't think we've submitted anything recently, but I'll check around, and if we have, you'll get it.
Okay, you'll get our stuff anyway, Mr. Lynn.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you both, Mr. Lynn, Mr. Ramberg, and Ms. Mahoney, for a very well organized presentation. this morning. And Mr. Lynn, I guess I grossly overestimated the time it would take to conclude this hearing, but we'll I guess
I'm sure you based that on past history with me. So
yeah. Well, I know there's attorney time and everybody else's time, so I just kind of double the amount of time the attorneys tell me. But this time it was accurate. So at any rate, thank you very much, and we are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will reconvene the agenda for Thursday, May 6th, and consider the matter that was originally scheduled for 9 o'clock and then was rescheduled to 3 o'clock this afternoon to accommodate 2 additional hearings that were also scheduled for 9 o'clock. This matter is case number PLREZ 18-0001, which is a non-project action to rezone a subject site's current zoning of employment district and single-family residential to general business or B2. The site is located at 11302 Burnham Drive, Gig Harbor, and the applicant in the matter is Henderson Burnham LLC. My name is Steve Casso. I'm the City of Gig Harbor hearings examiner. I am an attorney in the private practice of law with the firm of McCarthy and Casso that is located at 902 South 10th in Tacoma. So if anyone knows of a reason why I should not hear the matter this afternoon, please indicate. Otherwise, we will go ahead and proceed. The way we'll proceed then this afternoon is we will first hear a presentation of the Community Development Department staff report by Kim Mahoney. Following that, we'll see if the city has any additional testimony it wishes to present. And then following the city's presentation, we'll hear testimony from the applicant and those that wish to speak in favor of the zone reclassification. Following the applicant's presentation, we'll hear testimony from those who wish to speak in opposition or have questions or concerns. Following conclusion of the hearing this afternoon, I will take the matter under advisement and will issue a written decision. That decision will be transmitted to the city as well as the applicant and the applicant's representative. Anyone else who is on the meeting here this afternoon with us needs to provide your name and address to Ms. Andrews or Ms. Mahoney, and we will make sure that you receive a copy of the decision if in fact you'd like to. We are using the virtual hearing process this afternoon, and so I will need to swear everyone in individually as a witness. And once you are sworn in, you can commence your testimony by stating your name and address and spelling your last name for us so that we have it correct for the record. So at this time then, Ms. Mahoney, do you want to raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now and hearing shall be the truth?
I swear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. Before I dive in, I just want to remind everybody on the call today that for clarity of the record, because we are using a virtual format, please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking into the record. Mr. Examiner, before you now is a request for your consideration and decision of the proposed rezone application for the Terrace and Village in Henderson Heights at 11302 Burnham Drive, Gig Harbor. This proposal is a non-project action which proposes to change the zoning district for 6 parcels. The site is currently zoned ED or Employment District and R1 Single Family Residential. The applicant proposes to rezone the site to the B2 General Business District. This effort is intended to create consistency between the site's zoning district and its land use designation. The site is located in the commercial business or CB land use designation, which is consistent with either the C1, B1, or B2 zoning districts as implementing zones of the land use. It's important to note that the matter before you today is for the applicant's rezone request only. The request today does not include any element of the site's eventual or anticipated development. The site-specific rezone is subject to the review criteria set forth in Gig Harbor Municipal Code 17.35.100, which does not consider development of the site or the impacts associated with specific use of the site, nor permit certain development densities or performance standards for future use of the site. To that end, a determination of non-significance has been issued for the subject non-project action. This threshold determination is associated with permit file number PL-SEPA-18-0001. The DNS is included as Exhibit D to the staff report. Comments received by the public in response to the notice DNS are included as Exhibit G to the staff report. No appeals to the SEPA threshold determination were timely filed, and the SEPA became final on April 18th, 2021. Any future project action associated with this site will be reviewed by staff and will be issued a separate threshold determination which analyzes the impacts of the project action. This project's application and this hearing have been appropriately noticed, and all timely filed comments have been exhibited with my staff report for the hearing examiner's consideration. Specific to the notice of public hearing, the comment period ended at 5 p.m. last night, May 5th, 2021. All comments received by staff after the date of the staff report but before the close of the comment period were transmitted to the examiner's office with an addendum from staff dated May 5th, 2021. I request the hearing examiner incorporate this addendum and its referenced public comments into the project's records. As to the content of some of the comments submitted by the public, staff would note for the benefit of the examiner that some of the public comments reference two project numbers, PL-REZ 18-0001 and PL-REZ 21-0001. These are two separate rezone requests, both currently under review with the city. They've both proposed zone changes on adjacent lands in Gig Harbor. Staff has created a project map and included it as Exhibit K to the staff report. The map identifies the areas of each project. The subject of today's request is delineated in purple in Exhibit K. Staff has analyzed the proposed rezone application against the criteria for approval in Section 8 of the staff report and finds the requested rezone consistent with the criteria for approval and recommends the examiner approve PL-REZ 18-0001 subject to the recommended conditions in Section 10 of the staff report. This concludes my introduction of the Terrace in the Village and Henderson Heights rezone. Happy to address any questions that you might have.
And so you've analyzed the general criteria. I see on pages, I think it's 6 and 7 of the and 8 of the staff report.
Yes, Mr. Examiner.
Okay, could you just briefly run over those, just so that if people are listening in, they know what they are?
Absolutely, not a problem. We'll start on page 6. The first there are 4 criterion that need to be considered and found consistent by the hearing examiner for approval of a site-specific rezone. Those criteria are set forth in 17.100.035, and the first of which is that the application for the zoning district map amendment be consistent and further the goals, policies, and objectives of the comprehensive plan. The subject site rezone is to amend the current zoning designation of the site, which is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan land use designation. And so the proposed rezone is found to be consistent with meeting the policies and objectives of the comprehensive plan and land use designation that is associated therein. The second criterion speaks to the application of the zoning district amendment must further or bear a substantial relationship to the public health, safety, and general welfare. Much of this is analysis that'll be completed by staff in association with any development of the site, which is not the subject of today's matter. Although the hearing examiner has, the city engineer has recommended a condition of approval to be incorporated in the hearing examiner's decision on this matter, which addresses consistency with the second criterion. That recommendation is included as special condition number 2 in section 10 of the staff report. Criterion number 3 reads that no substantial detrimental effect will be caused by the granting of the application for the amendment. Again, this is only a rezone application. The content of the application is to create consistency between the zoning designation and the land use designation. And so staff found no detrimental effect to be caused by that. Again, any perceived or concerned detrimental effect that might be associated with the site's eventual development is to be considered at a time when staff reviews any sort of development land use permits that are associated and currently on hold with city community development department. And finally, criteria number 4, the proponents of the application have the burden of proof in demonstrating that conditions have changed since the original zoning or original designation of the property on the zoning district map. That was also found to be agreeable by staff, and there are quoted a history of annexation and comp plan designations that are associated with this site that have resulted in the current inconsistency between the site's comp plan land use designation and its zoning district.
Thank you. Does the city have anything further that it wishes to present?
Not at this time, Mr. Examiner.
Thank you. Mr. Lynn?
Thank you. William Lynn, representing the applicant. Before I launch into this, could I ask about exhibits? I know we have the staff report that's been admitted. We provided the city and you with a brief yesterday and a notebook with some exhibits, a binder, and then also a large packet of documents that really just represent the accompanying documents that were submitted with the original rezone. So I just wanted to make sure those are all in the record.
Those are in the record. I received those yesterday afternoon, and then also I was going to ask. I know this morning there was some confusion regarding the addendum, along with attached letters received prior to the close of the comment period. I wondered if you had received the addendum for this case.
I don't believe so. Ms. Ebsworth may have, or someone else, but I don't think I have seen it.
Okay, well, that's Ms. Ebsworth, did you receive a copy of that?
No, I haven't seen a link or anything for anything that would have been sent yesterday.
Okay, then we'll Ms. Mahoney, if you could make sure that Mr. Lynn and Ms. Ebsworth get a copy of that. I will go ahead. I'll go ahead and I won't take the time to do it now, but I will mark all of these matters. Do you want to? I was going to mark the notebook with your brief and then the attached notebook as an exhibit. Do you want me to separate the other documents that you submitted, or do you want to just introduce those as a packet, or how would you like to work that?
Yeah, they can just come in as a packet.
Okay. All
They're
right.
really, yeah, I'll explain when I get to that part of it, I think.
Okay. All right. Why don't you go ahead then, and we'll take care of it when we get to it.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to make some introductory comments and then call a witness, Cheryl Ebsworth, and then a short witness or brief witness, Ms. John Evans, and then I want to conclude. But the conclusion is important. It's not just a tail end. It's a significant part of this case. So we agree with Ms. Mahoney that this is a rezone that's not site specific. You're not being asked at this point to review any of the other permit applications that were filed with this. You're not being asked to make any land use decisions about the ultimate, what ultimately gets built on the property. But there are other applications, and I intend to talk about them a little bit, and they have a bearing on the second question that I will bring up in a few minutes. The first question is, should the property be rezoned? And we think that's pretty straightforward. There's actually a city code provision. It's section 17.12.015. We'll have a copy of it later in Ms. Ebsworth's testimony. But basically it says each of the land use designations under the comprehensive plan correspond to some and only some zones. So we have property here that has been designated under the comprehensive plan commercial business. That's been the case since 2009. But at no time since 2009 has this property been zoned for one of the zones to which or with which that comprehensive plan designation is associated. So basically there is a conflict, and has been since 2009, between the comprehensive plan and the zoning. The council changed the comprehensive plan but did not make the corresponding zoning change, and that's significant under the GMA, which requires that the two be consistent. It's the same requirement exists under the Gig Harbor City Code. They're supposed to be consistent. They haven't been consistent. What we're proposing to do is to make them consistent, and you would do that by designating the property B2. We will have evidence through Ms. Ebsworth and written documents to demonstrate that B2 was the intended zone even back to 2009. It, for some reason, wasn't that action wasn't taken at that time, but that was the designation that everybody thought was most appropriate for the site. We agree, so does the city, and so we think the rezone itself is relatively straightforward as a rezone is ever going to get. And in fact, we contend that the rezone is not only approvable, we contend, and I hope the city agrees, it's really necessary to bring the project, the property into compliance with both city and state requirements. So the other issue that I'm going to get to is that when these applications were filed, the rezone application was filed. It was filed with a package of other documents, including a plat, a PUD, a conditional use permit. Those were all applications identified as being necessary for the intended use of the property. And it's even though you're separately being asked to consider a non-site specific rezone, those have a bearing on the case. And it's our contention that the applicant's proposal and that the rezone you would be granting is for the B2 zone as it existed on the date of the application. I'll explain more about that, but I will note that the application that we filed in this case specifically says that we're asking the property to be rezoned to the B2 zone as it existed on the date of the application. So I'll come back with that. I don't want to complicate this. The rezone part of it itself is pretty straightforward. This other part is more complicated, more unique, I would say. But at this point, I think I'd like to introduce Ms. Ebsworth and go through her presentation that will actually support the entirety of our case.
Raise your right hand for me, please, Ms. Ebsworth. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now and hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And just if you could state your name for us and then your business address.
Cheryl Ebsworth, EBSWORTH, 2601 South 35th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98409.
And Ms. Ebsworth, what is your employment?
I'm a senior planner and project manager with Apex Engineering.
Okay, and you're the planner assigned to this project and have been since the beginning?
Yeah, I would say early 2016.
And who is the owner of the property?
The owner is the Wall family. Nick Wall is here on the call currently.
Okay. And Mr. Evans is also on the call. What's his relationship to the project?
He is the project manager for the family.
Okay. So we're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation that you have. And there, I will tell the examiner that that is exhibit 19 in the binder. Yes. To the city, we emailed these documents to the city. I think we tried to communicate with the city about whether or not they wanted a binder, and I don't think heard back. So I hope that that does not inconvenience Ms. Knudsen and Ms. Mahoney, both of whom are, I'm sure, much better at the electronic world than I would have been. I needed paper, so that's why we did it in this way. Cheryl, maybe if you could just start walking us through the PowerPoint that's on the shared screen now. We, from time to time, will refer to other documents that are in the binder, but if you'd start with just a general orientation to this project and in relation to other properties that the examiner may read about elsewhere in the record.
Okay, well, sure. So the second slide here on the presentation, I've shown the property in three ways. The top left image shows a star where the property is. It's northwest Gig Harbor on the west side of Highway 16. And then the next image on that slide zooms in and puts a star sort of centrally located to those 6 parcels in question for the rezone. And then the third image is an aerial, and that has that same star, and we've put a red dashed line around the rezone parcels and a highlight. But you can tell from this aerial image that this is a surface mine, and you can tell where that other surface mining has been occurring to the west. And that parcel is the other adjacent parcel that's undergoing a rezone that's not part of this application. And to the north is a treed area that is part of a previous application for a comp plan amendment. And at one point, all 3 of those areas were joined together in a master plan.
So there may be correspondence, or there may be even public comments relating to this larger project encompassing all 3 of these major land areas. But right now we're talking about the area that you have marked with a star where we see evidence of surface mining.
Yes.
And these are referred to as the Terrace and the Village for what reason?
Because we came in with a concurrent plat application, and there's 2 main access points on that with neighborhoods, and those were called the Terrace and the Village.
Okay, so those were just the names given by the owners to their intended hoped for project on the starred land.
Yes.
Okay, and so here we're just talking about the starred property.
Yes.
Can you tell the hearing examiner what you know about the annexation of this property into the city? When did that happen? You've got a timeline up here. That's the next slide in the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes. So what we understand from the record is that in 2002, the Gig Harbor Peninsula Plan became effective in Pierce County. So there was a considerable amount of work on that plan, and that placed this property in a CC community commercial zone within Pierce County. And that allowed both commercial and multifamily uses.
Okay. And then it was annexed into the city at March 23rd, 2009.
Yeah, and it looks like briefly at that point, the land use and zoning were both just made to match the existing use on site, which was the surface mine.
Okay, so when did the zoning of the property actually come into discussion with the city? Well, first of all, maybe you could refer the hearing examiner to the binder exhibits. And I see that first of all, the chronology looks like it's right behind the table of contents. And then we have this exhibit 1. What is exhibit 1?
So exhibit 1 is the annexation that occurred in 2009. So it shows the total area that was annexed into Gig Harbor, and these parcels were a portion of that, about centrally located on that hatched area on that map.
Okay, so really all we're doing here, this is the March 23rd, 2009 action.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what happened next chronologically?
Then there was an application to modify the land use to be more in line with the work that had been done in Pierce County for the Gig Harbor Peninsula Plan, and make that land use commercial business. And then there was discussion about how the city's B2 zone was the most in line with the county's community commercial zone.
Okay, so let's take a step. First of all, you said the land use designation was business. It was the one being applied for was commercial business. When you say land use designation, you're talking about the land use designation under the zone, under the comprehensive plan.
Yes, correct.
I know from my own experience that it's a little confusing to have land use designation and zoning, because in some jurisdictions, those are the same thing. But in Gig Harbor, the land use designation is what's assigned to property under the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and then what is Exhibit 2 in relation to the zoning history that you've talked about here?
This is the area that was considered to change to commercial business in the 2009 action.
Okay, and then, so you're talking about the PowerPoint. That's the area that depicts the area that was considered for commercial business. And then what is in the binder, Exhibit 2, the second exhibit?
Oh, yeah, so that is the minutes from that planning commission meeting, the work study session, where we've highlighted and starred where they have talked about the B2 zone being most like the CC zone, and that and staff agreeing and the planning commission agreeing that that is the zone that makes the most sense. But
so even though they were, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and they talk in here about that rezone happening at some later date.
So even though they were talking about the implementing zones that would be associated with the commercial business designation, they didn't actually take that step at that time.
Right.
Okay. So what happened next then?
So next it goes to city council. And the city council does approve the commercial business land use designation. And they do so in an ordinance 1181.
Okay, and that's exhibit tab 3 in the binder?
Yeah, that's tab 3. In this slide here, slide 8, it takes, some highlighted points from that annex, that ordinance. So they state that the EC designation to CB is not an increase in land use intensity. And they again state that the city's B2 zone is most like the county's CC zone.
Okay.
And then they also talk about the amount of work that went into that Gig Harbor Peninsula Community Plan.
Okay. And the specific pages that are from that ordinance and the findings that are made there are pages 7 and 8. Those are the pages that.
Yeah, because there was more than one action in the ordinance.
Okay, so page 7 and 8 are where we're talking about this property. Okay, so could you continue then on with the next slide?
Yeah, so that leads us to the way that the zoning and land use looks today, and that's what these two slides depict. So on the left is the zoning, which shows the ED employment district zone and the small piece of R1 that's depicted in light yellow here. And then on the right-hand side is the land use designation or the comprehensive plan, and that shows the commercial business designation on the 6 parcels we're looking to rezone. As well as the residential medium that was put on the parcel to the west a few years ago. So, but this is how on our project, 6 parcels, we have a situation where the zoning and the comp plan do not align.
Okay, so for the examiner's purposes, again, on the right-hand side depiction, it's the red area, and the left picture, it's the blue area that corresponds with that.
Yes.
Okay, and then what's next in your presentation?
So next, we go back to the timeline just to highlight that in 2016 is when Henderson Burnham, the current owners, purchased the property. And so that's when Apex gets involved and we start doing feasibility studies and figuring out what's going to be the best use for the properties.
Okay. So just to be clear, from 2009, when the city made the designation, to 2016, when the current owners acquired it and started their process, nothing happened that we know of anyway that's relevant to the examiner's decision.
Right.
Okay. So then on June 20th, 2017, what happened?
That's when we submit the master plan concept for an assemblage of properties, and that's includes the Terrace and the Village properties that are under review today, and we specify the use that would be on those as townhomes.
Okay, so if we were to look at the same drawing or the same aerial is in the binder at page or tab 4, those are the 4 areas of the master plan, and you're showing the Terrace and Village in the lower right-hand corner of that.
Yeah, that's correct. And then there's a table where at that point we were describing what was allowed on the properties and what we were proposing to show that there wasn't an increase proposed.
Okay, and so Terrace and Village, it indicate you indicated 98 housing with this master plan, and
right.
This is just context for the later decisions then. So so what happened next in your chronology?
So then we have a pre-application meeting with city staff. And this is after they've seen our master plan concept. So we're somewhat talking about the project in its entirety and what steps would be necessary to, and what order they should go in, and timelines for actually being successful. So that we get some feedback from the city, and that's this next slide that I believe corresponds with tab 5. And we were given a land use matrix, and on the top there, that's notes from staff that show us what designations our master plan is within. So there's a star on R1, and that's for the woodlands portion. And then there's an arrow down for R2 that says gravel mine, and that's the Smith property that was called the Highlands on the prior slide. And then there's those 3 arrows for commercial on B1, B2, and C1. And we were told that we had to pick between those zones, and that any development of the property had to be brought into compliance with the comp plan. And those were the 3 options. And it was noted to us that B2 was envisioned back when the comp plan change occurred.
Okay, I want to go back through that slowly. So there was some discussion of the overall site plan, but as to the Terrace and Village, the 3 zones that were identified, first of all, the city said that a rezone would be necessary for any development of the property.
Yeah, I said any change of land use would have to be in compliance with the comp plan. And because the comp plan had been changed more recently than the zoning, it had to be rezoned.
Okay. And then, so it had to be rezoned, and it had to be rezoned to one of those 3 that were where the arrows are C1, B1, B2.
Yeah.
Okay. And who, is this an actual document that came out of that pre-application meeting?
Yeah, we got, that is Lindsay Samuel's handwriting. She was the long-range planner for the city at the time of that meeting.
Okay. And Zamel's S-E-H-M-E-L.
Yeah.
And so those are her marks on that exhibit?
Yes.
Okay. And then what's the, down below, there's a excerpt from city code. Could you tell the examiner what that is?
Yeah, so that's the section of code that talks about the land use designations and which zoning districts actually implement those land use designations. Okay. So you have, in some designations, there's more than one zone available, and in other, there's only one zone. So in commercial business, you can again see that there's those 3 zoning options, C1, B1, and B2, about mid-table.
Okay. And you understood this was the origin then of the city's marks on the colored use table?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then what happens next in the sequence?
So then we have a formal pre-application meeting just on the Terrace in the Village with current planning that we made a formal application for, so that we would get, formal notes back from staff on just that plat application.
So the earlier pre-application was more informal, and then this was the actual formal one from which emerged a set of notes that detail what would be required.
Yeah.
And so, and this one focused only on the terrace in the village.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what emerged from that?
So that is Exhibit 6 in the binder, and it's this 6-page memo was provided to us at the start of the pre-app meeting in like a peachy envelope that outlined the prep work that Peter Kadich, the assigned current planner, had done. And we kind of walks you through and helps you understand what you're going to need to provide when you come in to make a complete application. And at the end, they list all the required applications with the fee amounts so that you can be prepared to have those and pay for them.
And that's what's set out on page 5 of 6.
Yeah, so that's what's highlighted on the slide here, because it's very clear to us that we had to have a rezone with this concurrent package in order to be complete.
Okay. So then what happens next?
We have a design review board meeting and where we go over the townhome architecture and the with the design review board.
So how are you, sorry, but how are you able to have a design review board presentation when you haven't even submitted applications as of the 15th of?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a pre-app design review board. So there'd be no, it's an optional meeting for us to get additional feedback, but there's no requirement to have that before submittal.
Okay. And I see at tab 7, there's some pictures of look like townhouses. Were those submitted to the design review board at that?
Yeah, this is what was presented so that we could get their initial feedback because we knew this is not, you know, we're with this PUD that we're proposing, it is an innovative housing type for Gig Harbor. And there isn't really a code that expressly allows these attached units. And so this, you know, we needed their input. And we anticipated some redesign in these units as we moved forward.
Okay. So Exhibit 7 depicts what they were anticipated to look like. And then Exhibit 8, is that the layout that was planned at that time?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
So even though you had this meeting with Mr. Kadich regarding the more formal pre-application, you actually had been working on it for some time prior to that. I'm assuming.
Yes, we had.
Okay. So these drawings don't materialize overnight. They'd been in progress then.
Right. Yeah, they had, and you know, we'd been working on it, and you have to, you know, apply for the pre-app and wait for the meeting time. So we had more specific questions because we're farther along. But yeah, we were, that was a required pre-application meeting. And so we were making sure we got that done as we were preparing everything.
When you say the required pre-application meeting, that's the one with Mr. Kadich, not
yeah, on the 10th. Yep.
Okay. And then what happened next then?
So on the 16th, we had made a submittal appointment at the counter, and we checked in with Peter Kadich. I think it took about an hour, and he went through each document that's in that submittal package that we provided, and made sure that we had every checklist for each type of application, everything was provided, and he opened up the maps and made sure that specific information was on maps before determining that it was a complete application enough to take payment.
So we talked earlier about a large package of documents that the examiner received yesterday and asked if we wanted to go through them all. And I think I said I didn't, or at least I said I didn't want to mark them separately. Is that large packet of documents that that we've presented, is that the complete application package that was submitted to the city on January 16th, 2018?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that includes all of the applications that Mr. Kadich had identified as being necessary for the project, including the plat, the rezone, the PUD, the conditional use permit, and others?
Yep.
Okay. And what happened next chronologically?
So then the next day, Peter Kadich issued the notice of complete applications for each application type that we submitted.
And those are under tab 9 in the binder?
Yes.
Please continue on with the chronology then. What happened next in the?
And at the counter, we did add this note that ended up on the determination of completeness that said that we were waiving our review time of the plat and rezone for a determination on our comp plan amendment and development agreement that were basically the master plan concepts.
So at that point, you were still thinking that these might be developed as part of the master plan with the other 2 properties?
Yeah, and yep, for sure.
And so the applications were deemed complete, but sort of put on hold for the time being anyway.
Yes, we're trying to, as much as possible, have these come at the same time. So the project could all be developed at one time.
Okay. So we're January of 2018. What happened next then?
So then in March, the Planning Commission hears the master plan project, and they discuss the need for a rezone on the Terrace and Village and the townhome concept for the project, the master plan project.
Okay, so when you say they talked about the need for it, who talked about the need for it?
The Planning Commission and staff, as well as the applicant.
Okay.
And we refined our townhome elevations by that point, taking input from the design review board. And so we had some additional new sort of elevation examples at that meeting.
Okay, and that's what's depicted here where it says townhouse examples, March 1, 2018.
Yeah. Mhm.
So is it fair to say that at this design planning commission meeting, there was a general recognition that this rezone was necessary?
Yeah, and I believe I said that we understood we had to have a rezone for any development, and it was confirmed by staff by saying that, yes, the applicant has to complete that process that was started in 2009.
Complete the rezone that went along with the comprehensive plan amendment. Okay, then chronologically, what happens?
So then there's group 1 and group 2 residential development limitations that are passed by city council.
So let me take you back a step. In 2018, there was a fairly big change in the composition of the city council.
Yes. Yeah.
And there were, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but there were lots of things going on that might change the zoning regulations, fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is then one of the things that happened with the new council, this April 23rd and June 11th action.
Yeah. And we have here, this is a summary of the changes to the code that happened from those 2 ordinances. And in the binder, we have copies of both full ordinances, but this is a city produced letter that outlines those changes.
And so just so the record's clear, you're referring to the document that says at the top of the page, 2018 residential moratorium code changes.
Yeah.
And then the 2 documents that are in the record are under tab 10 and 11. Those are the 2 actual ordinances.
They should, actually, they're both under tab 10.
Okay.
They should be, let me double check. Oh, yeah, they are. They're both under tab 10.
Both under tab 10. Okay. And so how did that change have any bearing on the Terrace and Village?
Well, we didn't think it did, because ordinance 1389 expressly stated that vested applications would not be subject to these changes. So while we were tracking this, we felt confident that if our application kept moving forward, that this would not apply to our project. But it did change. B2 went from having no maximum density specified. So that means to me that you have to meet all the other requirements for landscaping and impervious coverage, but you don't have a density cap. So you're working with all the other development restrictions. And now they've changed that to a maximum density of 6 dwelling units per acre. And at this point, we've been very clear that ours was built to 10 dwelling units per acre.
Okay. And then what happened after that? Then you didn't think you were covered. You watched it, but you didn't participate. The council though did adopt the rule in June.
So then in December 20th, we request that the plat processing and all the concurrent applications begin to take that hold off.
Okay, so in the council acts to change the B2 density, to put cap on it. And then what was going on between June when they did that and September when you told the city to go ahead and process Terrace and Village?
Well, we did have our master plan amendment was part of the 17 cycle of comp plan amendments, and that got extended to the 2019 or 2018 cycle and through ordinance 1400. And I think I skipped over that. That's tab 11.
Okay.
And so and then it was,
sorry, but for purposes of today, is it fair to say that the master plan ran into some headwinds and some potential delays?
yeah. And so at this point, we needed to move forward with what we could move forward with.
Okay, and that was the Terrace and the Village.
Yeah.
And so in December, you, well, go ahead and just tell the examiner what happened next then.
Yeah, so in December, we asked for that plat to get processed. And then in January, we listened to the city council retreat that's held, and we've transcribed some audio that's under tab 13. But in that audio, you'll hear Katrina Knutson stating what the goals and the highest priorities are for the planning department. And she expressly states that she thinks that the rezone code needs to be changed because currently you can vest a plat with a rezone. And then she specifically cites our Henderson Burnham project and says that we are vested and that we can move forward. And she doesn't think that's normal and that code should be changed.
And that's under tab 13. The examiner can read the exact words, but you're just paraphrasing.
Yeah, I'm just paraphrasing.
Okay, and then what happens?
And that's the slide, sorry. So then on March 20th, we get our first plat comments from the city. And these don't come to us where we can easily share them. They come as a link with separate PDF documents that are our submittals, and there are red line comments on them. But we understand them to be a complete comment from all of our concurrent applications.
Okay.
And then they tell us that when we need to be ready to tell them what response we're addressing with each change. So we take it upon ourselves to organize all the red line comments by department and person and on what sheet so that we can understand them all and organize and make sure that we don't miss any. And that's what we're working on when we keep skipping a slide here so you can't see in between. That's what we're working on when we get this April 8th email from Peter Cabbage.
Let's hold off a second. Let's go back to the comments. And then, because there's a document under tab 14, is that your consolidation of all the city comments?
Yeah, so that's a document Apex created to organize the red line comments received.
Okay, so in the comments that you got from the city, was there any objection to the density or to the B2 zoning? Any comment about that at all?
No, there were comments that we thought would related to the PUD that were about setbacks. And we definitely thought everything was workable. We could clarify and understand better. And that's sort of how we were approaching these comments, but there was nothing that said, this was outright, not our zone or anything.
So you're getting very specific comments in March about very, not details, but at various specific aspects of the development. And even though the council had changed the density, no comments about any problems with the density or any cap on density or anything about the rezone at all.
Right, yeah. Yeah, we actually didn't get any red line comments on our rezone written request, but in our mind, that just meant there was no issue with the rezone, and that the comments were on the PUD and other applications. It wouldn't be uncommon for us to not get a comment or a red line on every single thing we submitted.
As long as it was consistent with, I mean, as long as there weren't comments.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That to me, that meant they agreed with what we were stating about the rezone criteria.
Okay. So I started, or I interrupted you when you were starting to talk about the April email. Could you tell the hearing examiner about that?
Yeah, so on April 8th, we get email from Peter Cattage that tells us, paraphrasing again, that we know we sent you comments, but we've since had additional review, and it's been determined that your plat and rezone are not vested. And then he goes on to, you can see there's a longer email. He gives some options there that we don't think are workable. And so I believe we called our land use attorney at this point.
And so tab 16 then represents the applicant's response to the city in response to Mr. Cattage's email.
Yes, and so in the tab, can't really see it here on this slide, but tab 16 is the full size letter where we address why we believe that we are vested and that we should, so. Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point after that, the city, well, there was a recognition that it might make more sense to go ahead and do the B2 rezone separately as a preliminary step.
Yeah, I think for us, we felt, Peter Cattage ended up retiring, and we felt like we would just be sitting here waiting, and we needed to keep things moving forward. So we needed some kind of a decision made.
Well, I mean, Mr. Cattage's email essentially said you can either modify your application to be consistent with the ED zoning, which was nothing that the applicant had ever proposed, or to modify it to be in keeping with the new B2 density limits, which the applicant didn't think applied.
Right. Right. So, so I think with your help, we determined that we could run the rezone ahead and at least all agree that the zone on the property should be B2. And so this is our master application, and it's on here because we, under our project description, we clearly state that we believe that our.
Sorry, let me, you say our application, we already had a rezone application. Why did we file another one?
The city requested that we pull the rezone out separately from the rest of our concurrent application package so that they could have documents that only speak to the rezone. Okay. So there wasn't a new notice of application issued because this was the same application, just described on its own.
Sort of, at least from your understanding, sort of a paperwork thing that the city needed you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how did you refer to the B2 zone that you were seeking in this application? And this, by the way, is under tab 17 of the binder.
So we said that our request was, because it always was, to go to the version of B2 as codified at the date of our complete application, which included this rezone, or January 17th, 2018.
Okay. And then there's at least one more document in the binder, the determination of non-significance.
Yeah, so this is the SEPA determination that Kimberly issued before this hearing.
Okay. Is there anything else that you're, I'm sorry, you've just now put up.
Yeah.
on the PowerPoint, this is just part of the rationale that was provided in the application for the rezone and going through the criteria.
Yeah, this is a summary from our rezone written criteria. And just because it's a rezone hearing and it's usually our burden to also include this, we've included other reasons that I think we agree with the city that the B2 zone makes sense, that it's, bringing us into compliance with the comp plan. And it's fixing a conflict that already existed. And there's no substantial detrimental effect by going to this zone. And we've actually, with our SEPA review that we've done, it does look at the traffic that would be associated. And we do have memos from prior that compares that traffic from these townhomes to potential commercial style development that could happen for the B2 zoning, and shows that we don't, we actually have less of an impact. Because the city code does allow you to be, if you do have a specific proposal in mind, you can show how your proposed net, potential impacts are reduced by review of your project details.
Okay,
And
so so could you, as a planner, just comment briefly on the why you think B2 fits better than C1 or B1?
Yeah, so I think one, it is of note that the area was highly studied in 2002 because the gravel mine and the surface mine that's happening there is coming to an end. And so it's reclaiming. And so everyone sort of could see that this was going to change. You do have Highway 16 pretty close adjacent to the east. And then you've got a residential development that's to the west. And so this is a good transition area. And B2 is sort of a transition zone. So you can have some multifamily or residential use, or you could have some limited commercial, depending on what makes the most sense at that time and in that location. So in this location, with the way that the freeway entrances are and those roundabouts and the traffic patterns, we agree that residential makes more sense on this project, and to have something that would still allow for ownership would make sense for the neighborhood, but maybe not quite as large of lots as you'd see up higher on the hill, because these are closer to the freeway. And so it's an opportunity to provide a different type of ownership that the city doesn't have a lot of. And in our mind, that's in keeping with the comp plan to provide that variety. So there's some unique situations on this property, but it also affords some unique outcomes that I think benefit the neighborhood. And that's where our thinking led.
Thank you. Is there anything that you have in your chronology or otherwise that you think we need to cover that I haven't asked you about?
Not that I'm thinking of now, no.
The examiner may have questions, or the staff, I'm not sure.
Ms. Mahoney, do you have any questions you wanted to ask Ms. Zemsworth?
Well, I guess my first question is that all these tabbed exhibits that were discussed, the city's not received any of this. We received the PowerPoint, but I've not received the binder or an electronic version of the binder. I'm wondering if one can be sent to us.
I thought we had sent you a link to the binder, what is called a binder. And then I know Mr. Fitz called somebody yesterday trying to find out if there was a place we could deliver a physical copy, but you didn't get an email with that link?
No, I only got an attachment that included the PDF for the presentation that we just received. And so some of the more detailed tabs, multiple doctrines, isn't something that I have.
We can certainly provide that. I apologize. I thought that went to you, so.
Yeah, I think, I believe Ruben sent that out, so it wouldn't have been an email from me. So it might have gone to the city attorney.
I believe I did. I will recheck and send again one way or another right now. I do apologize if that did not come through. It would have been two links. It would be in the package that has been determined to be one exhibit, and it would also be the exhibits is the separate link, and they are labeled 1 through 19, and the PowerPoint was one of those exhibits.
I don't have that.
I will resend right now.
Maybe you could separate it, Ruben, just to make sure that it doesn't get, well, I guess one document that I wouldn't.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I don't think I have any questions at this point. Thank you, Ms. Ebsworth.
Thank you.
I would like to call John Evans just for a few questions. John, I assume you're still on.
Okay.
Are you there, Mr. Evans?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you
Yes.
swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now and hearing shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
John, would you please state your name and tell the examiner what your involvement is in the project?
Yes. My name is John, John Evans, Evans. Address 12 Bloomdale, Irvine, California, 92614. I am the project manager and agent for the Wall family, who have, as an applicant, is under the Henderson Burnham LLC entity.
And Mr. Evans, you've worked on other land use matters prior to this one
Yes, I have.
for a number of years.
Yes,
And where is that taking place? Here in Washington, California, elsewhere?
multi-states in Washington, California, Utah,
Okay.
and primarily been involved in doing master plan communities. Was involved with Silver Creek and Puyallup. Was involved with the Meridian campus down in Lacey, and involved with McCormick Woods and Port Orchard.
Okay.
Are three main large master plan communities that we're involved with.
Okay. And in your role, did you attend city meetings on the project and the different elements of it?
Yes, worked quite closely with Cheryl from the very beginning and attended all meetings, and had not only with the city, with Apex, other consultants, but also with neighbors. And that one of the things that we started out with initially was a outreach program, because we wanted to make sure that we had input from the neighbors, that what we were wanting to do, and wanted to listen if they had any issues with what we were doing, and so that we could incorporate it into our project, as we did with the city, in going in initially asking for or sharing our concept and making sure that we had a project that could possibly be developed, and so that we wouldn't be wasting a lot of time and money.
Yeah. And was it from some of those early community meetings that the plan evolved to include townhouses on the terrace and village part of the properties?
Yes, as Cheryl mentioned, in good land planning, you kind of look at the topography, you look where your location is, and we had the Highway 16 at the foot of the project. So as she mentioned, it's a transition. And so we decided we would go from attached and work up the hill to where we'd have detached. And we were looking to deliver single family and attached, which was be townhomes.
Okay. And were you involved specifically in the pre-application meeting with Lindsay Zamel at the end of 2017?
Yes, I was.
And what's your recollection of your conversation with her about the need for a rezone of the property?
As Cheryl mentioned, she advised us that we had to have a different zoning for the property because the ED was not consistent with the general plan, and shared with us that what three options we had under the general plan land use of commercial business. And one of those was the B2, and the B2 made sense again because of the history and make in the prior comments that it was considered appropriate fit, and we agreed.
So when you say there was discussion about that being the appropriate zone, that was Lindsay Zamel saying that, not you saying that.
That is correct.
Okay, I don't have any other questions of Mr. Evans.
Do you have any questions you want to ask Ms. Mahoney?
I do not.
I think he was asking Ms. Mahoney.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Examiner, I don't have any questions, although I do want to clarify my previous statement for the record. I did find the email that was sent from Ruben. I appreciate having received that. I did receive that yesterday, so thank you.
And you actually have a nice binder on my desk with your name on it. That doesn't do you much good. And I certainly would understand if the city wants to keep the record open to review the documents. I don't, basically the same as what's in the presentation, but.
Hey, Bill, do you mind, can I make one more concluding comment?
Sure.
The managing partner that I worked with initially in the process of acquiring the property and then following through with the master plan concept was Mick Wall, who unfortunately passed away recently. And it was his vision that wanted to enhance the site because he's considered the site eyesore. And so he wanted to beautify it for the city, been a longtime resident, was proud of the area, and he just was intent on doing something that he wanted the city be proud of, the neighbors be proud of, and also his family.
So I think if that brings us to my argument, I'm happy to do that now. The rest of my argument.
Do you want to save that until we hear if there's any other testimony that then you could address any issues that are raised at that time?
That's a good idea. Thank you.
I just had, Ms. Mahoney, I know that I just had one question I wanted to ask you. I know that I think Mr. Lynn asked you a question about Mr. Kadich and that he is retired from or maybe it was Ms. Ebsworth, that Mr. Kadich had retired from the city. How about Ms. Zamel? Is she still with the city?
She's not.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Ms. Andrews, is there anyone that has indicated their desire to speak?
Currently, there are no hands raised.
Okay.
So,
Then
I will stand corrected now. We have Michael S. has just raised his hand to speak.
okay, you want to put him up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Sir, could you raise your right hand for me, please?
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in the case now in hearing shall be the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and I need you to state your name for us and spell your last name and your address.
Michael Savitsky. Last name is Sierra Oscar Victor India Tango, Sierra Kilo Yankee Savitsky.
Okay.
I'm at 11123 63rd Avenue Northwest here in Gig Harbor.
All right, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I've listened to pretty much everything going on here, and I understand that it's kind of a narrow scope on the rezone, but some of the things that I heard, I wanted to either bring up or just it may end up as a kind of a question. So please bear with me. The first one talked about the SEPA that was recently done. Also talked about a traffic look for what's being proposed or possibly being proposed. And in the traffic impact in 18, the numbers that were posed in here, some of the issues that I'm curious about are the fact that one, it talks about just this terrace and village. It focuses only on the 112th Burnham intersection And in some of the narrative, it says it remains in a line level of service A with in the next year or two could bump into levels of service B. However, none of the impact studies take into account any of the neighboring projects that will funnel into the exact same point, nor does it take into account the level of service echo per the transportation plan of the Semmel, Burnham, and the roundabouts. And so I feel as though if they're going to bring up a transportation study, that it should encompass the real critical areas there. It's more of a statement right now. Really don't have a question, but I just wanted to get that concern on the record since I heard it brought up in the testimony. The second thing I want to bring up is to talk about the townhomes. The other thing that I've read in the comprehensive plan talks about minimizing the appearance of multi-family structures. Specifically, it talks about retain the multifamily structures near the fringe of established single-family neighborhoods or strategic locations where larger structures would not abruptly alter a single-family character. And we're nothing but single-family here along Woodhill Drive, I'm blanking on the neighboring village here, in Henderson Bay Estates. It seems to me that that's a counterpoint. Comprehensive plan says one thing, but these high density townhomes kind of talks against that. So that's another strategic point I want to bring up since this was discussed in witness testimony. And finally, it just seems to me that there's a lot of talk about, well, originally we brought up this proposal and the whole vested or not vested. It seems to me that died, and now we're trying to bring to life a new plan in a B2, where I certainly would think that the newer zoning restrictions or whatever was put into play would be most appropriate, especially given the density that is being talked about. That's what I wanted to say, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Szynski, do you have a citation for the comprehensive plan section you were referring to about multifamily, not being consistent with single family, or that it shouldn't be visible?
Yes, sir. What I have was in the comprehensive plan housing element within paragraph 6.2.2. And it says, I think the title was minimizing appearance of multifamily structures. And I have in my notes, sub-item C and D.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak, Ms. Andrews?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, Mr. Lynn, then you can go ahead with your concluding remarks.
Thank you. As I noted at the beginning, I think the rezone to B2 is really straightforward as much as it ever would be. You've got a code that says that it's the comprehensive plan element, which is newer than the zoning, is only implemented by 3 zones. So we're limited to that choice. The consensus then was B2 was appropriate. I think we've made the case for it now. It's appropriate, and not only is it appropriate, it really should have been completed long ago. And that's why Ms. Zamel said, as a prerequisite to any applications on this property, there's going to have to be a rezone. The comp plan and the zoning were out of sync from day one, and that's why she made that comment. That's why the rezone is really it's more the application of standards. I'll come back to this, but lots of times with a rezone, someone just buys a piece of property and hopes they can get it designated for a higher and better use of some kind. That's not the case here. We're really doing what should have been done over a decade ago. So this is not the kind of speculative rezone that has been the subject of other case law. This is really involves the application of some pretty specific standards that really lead to a particular outcome. I will analogize this really almost more like the approval of a PUD. There's some discretion, but not very much. So we think the property ought to be rezoned, and we're also asking you to determine that the rezone is to B2 as it existed on the date of the complete application, recognizing that that's not quite something that I've been involved in before. This is a very unique case in my view and experience. And yet I think the outcome that we ask for here is inevitable. And so here's why I think this is a decision that's properly before you. Number one, this is the kind of decision you make all the time. You make decisions about vested rights. You make decisions about interpretations of codes. You make decisions about lawfulness of proposed conditions. You make decisions about whether or not conditions imposed under SEPA are appropriate. So this is a legal question that I think falls certainly within the range of decisions that you make on a regular basis. Number two, it's necessary because in order for you to ascertain the appropriateness of the B2 zone, you ought to know what the B2 zone allows. And it's a different zone if it allows one thing versus another. If it allowed a shopping center, it would be different than if it allowed it homes. And it's a different decision here, depending on which version of the code applies. A third reason is that our application specifically requested a zone, not just a B2, but to B2 as it existed on that date. And then finally, and this is really the practical one, there's no other time or place, there's no other person who can appropriately make this decision. You kind of have to go back to Mr. Kadich's email, which really was a radical departure from everything we had heard up to that point. All the comments that were made previously suggested that this was a vested package that was going forward under the rules that existed at the time. The comments that the city made in March, late March, themselves really seemed to presume that the B2 zone would be applied to the property, and that the density that was permitted there that would is what would be in place on the property. That would be the basis upon which these other applications would be reviewed. So that's where we were heading up until this April email from Peter Kadich. And then he says, due to this situation, namely his change in the city's change in position that happened, we don't know how, you can do one of two things. You can proceed, you can redevelop your property with the ED zone. Of course, that's an employment zone. It's completely unlike everything that had been under review for the last couple of years. And that was completely contrary to what Lindsay Zamel had said. But you can revise your application to propose something you never did propose and never would propose. That's one choice. And the other choice is to proceed with the rezone application. But first, you have to comply with the new B2 zone that the council has put this cap on. So in other words, you can take this form of poison or another, but you can't do what you applied to do and what's been under review for the city by the city for a long time. So what's the applicant to do? To apply for something it doesn't want to do on the property, or to proceed down the path all the way through the review of this higher density townhouse project, and then get a denial a year from now or 2 years from now and then appeal? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's not a good use of the public's process, the public's resources, or the applicants. And it's not it's not a fair outcome. It's not a logical outcome. So we think that this issue is appropriately before you and needs to be decided by you, so that both the applicant and the city know the fate of the project. And again, we're not asking that the development plans be approved. We know we have to go through the conditional use permit process. We know we have to go through the PUD process. We just want those applications to be reviewed on the basis of the zoning that existed at the time we made these applications. So how is this a vested right? The platting statute says we have a vested, we have the opportunity, the right to submit an application to preserve the property owner's rights to against arbitrary and subsequent actions of local legislative officials. That's what the platting statute's all about. And the courts, and in this case, the Gig Harbor Code, say that that includes PUDs. So even if a PUD is a kind of a rezone, the courts in the Kent case that we cited and in the Associated Rural Residents of Kitsap County case that we cited say that you vest your rights to have the PUD considered as well under those current rules, because that's part and parcel of a single application. So, and the city's code, by the way, says the same thing. It says if you file a plat and a PUD, they're both considered under the rules in effect at the time. In this case, unless we had the right to submit these applications on the B2 zone as it existed at the time, that's an empty right. We essentially have no right to vest because the city told us we couldn't, there was no zone to which we could vest at that time because the ED zone was not a lawful one, even under the city's view and certainly under the city's codes. So a rezone is necessary, but we think that the rezone that applies in the zone rather that applies to this property is the one that's in effect at the time. So there are cases out there, as I mentioned earlier, that say a rezone doesn't vest, but those are very different cases than this one. Those are cases where somebody was just speculating on the hope that a city council would change the zone in the future. And the courts have said that in the Teed case anyway, that you don't have a vested right to that. You're speculating. You're not relying on your established rights. You're speculating. This is not like that because the applicant isn't speculating. It's not relying on something that wasn't part of the package that applied to the property. It's relying on the commercial business designation that's been on the property since 2009. It's applying to the only code to which it could vest. The B2 zoning is essentially what was constructively on the property already. I think that's a fair way to put it. The city owed that zoning to the property. That's what the law required in terms of consistency and compatibility, and that's the right to which the applicant had the right to vest. We have submitted a brief. Like I said, this is not an ordinary case, but we do think that the applicant has the right to have its multiple applications, all, including the plat application, reviewed on the basis of those rules that existed at the time, and that includes the B2 zoning that should have been put on the property back in 2009. We also, in the brief, cover this sort of summarily, but under the project review statute, there's a provision that says you're supposed to review a project under the zoning code, or in the absence of zoning, the comprehensive plan. And we believe that that provision applies here because the zoning that was on the property was admittedly incorrect. So in that condition and that circumstance, the zoning that should be reviewed really is that which is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So we also think that that's a basis for applying the zone before the council really took aim at the project with its June actions, at least apparently. And that's, I think that's a point worth making. The whole point of vested rights is to protect against actions that are aimed at and attempting to thwart a project. And that's really what happened here. Somebody had their sights on this project, and even though it was vested, and even though the applicants had done all the right things and made all the applications the city told them to make and done everything they could and produce this massive stack of paper for the city's review, get a new council, and the new council takes aim and tries to put a dagger in the heart of the project. That's what I think the law says they do not have the right to do by virtue of the vested rights doctrine. That's all I have at this point. I do, we did submit a brief. I urge you to, and I know you will, review that. And I don't think we have anything further at this point.
Ms. Mahoney, does the the city have anything further, or you said you might want additional time to review Mr. Lynn's brief and all of the documents that he submitted?
I don't know that we'll need the additional time for the record to remain open to review all of that, namely because I do have feedback that I would like to provide at this time, which is that the first item that Mr. Lynn introduces regarding the whether it's appropriate for the rezone application to be approved, that response should be yes. We concur. That's evident in the staff report. As to the second item that was just discussed, we do not concur. That is not the matter that is introduced at this afternoon's hearing. The only permit as part of the application that is on file for this holistic proposal, which is on hold, is the preliminary plat. The preliminary plat is not included in the matter that is being discussed this afternoon, and because it is the only permit type that is subject to any vesting rights, I think any decision that affords any vested right determination is not appropriate at this point. I'm sorry, it took some additional notes. If you could just allow me to, I understand that there was some discussion in Mr. Lynn's conversation, his testimony just now about the absence of zoning and the applicability of that. There is no absence of zoning on the site. There is zoning, it's just inconsistent. And so I don't think that any doctrine that discusses an absence of zoning is applicable in this conversation. I'd also like to circle back to some of the items that were discussed throughout the testimony in today's hearing that discuss the type of the option of zoning designations that are appropriate for this site. I think that it's been acknowledged by everybody involved that there are 3 implementing zoning designations that are associated with the CB land use designation that would be considered as implementing or consistent, and that would be the C1, the B1, and the B2. And so to afford vested rights to a zoning district that did not exist on the site, and to choose which of the 3 zoning districts that would be, I think is woefully inappropriate and not a matter of the permit that's at hand today, which is simply for the rezone application to the B2 zone. Really, that fairly well sums up the comments that I would make on behalf of the city.
Do you want the city attorney to take a look at Mr. Lynn's brief?
I think I would ask for Katrina Knudsen to be able to be read into the record at this point to address your question, Mr. Examiner.
Mr. Examiner, would it be possible to request an additional week or 2 to allow for the city attorney to review the brief that we received yesterday late afternoon and, if necessary, provide a response for your consideration?
You have any objection, Mr. Lynn? No. Why don't we, I don't know what the city attorney's schedule is, but I'll leave the record open for a maximum of 2 weeks for the city attorney. And then, and Mr. Lynn, if you want to respond to the city attorney's brief, I'll allow another week for that.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner.
All right. And Mr. Lynn, if you don't want to respond, just just let me know and I'll close the record at that point.
All right, thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have anything further before Ms. Mahoney?
Oh, just a point of clarity, Mr. Examiner, oftentimes when we leave the record open, you ask for counsel or applicants to transmit their additional submittals through me to provide to you. Is that how you'd like to also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do that. That would be fine.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for a most interesting hearing this afternoon, and I am you know, I was upset. I was kind of upset with staff this morning because we had these 3 hearings, 2 of them which I thought were going to be monstrous, and didn't see how we could possibly do it all in a day. But you knew more about it than I did, and so anyway, I appreciate everyone's participation and you know, and just going at three very straightforward hearings, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much, and we are now adjourned.